Hey everybody out there in YouTube land and other platforms I'm probably going to be posting on because, well, YouTube's not really reliable anymore. Well, I kind of doing a different video this time for people who may have watched my channel and doesn't really know too much about me or whatnot, but yeah, I figure there's probably not that many people out there that actually like follow my channel anyways, so figure I'd just kind of go for something just a little bit personal. I mean, everyone kind of has like their ups and downs in life and whatnot, but I've been kind of suffering from depression for a while, and it was kind of funny watching the Paul Joseph Watson video that he just released about kind of like the age of incontinence and how people are like freaking out over, not getting the car they wanted when they were 16 or whatnot like that and stuff. And it kind of made me wonder, like when you really kind of think about your life or whatnot, especially the different stages, it's kind of interesting to see just how people change or how some people don't change. I've known people who've been dead set in their ways and never really, changed their perspective on anything, really. We're always kind of, single-minded and whatnot. But, some people would say that's also stubbornness, too. Usually people have, like, a strong will, or, or sometimes people are just really not looking to, give another shot to, or another, thought for something else, for that matter. But anyways, I guess I'll start off. See myself, I was kind of like, I was born in the 80s, kind of like mid-80s area, and, yeah, it was kind of interesting, because my, biological dad, was affiliated with, groups like Satan's Choice and Hell's Angels or whatnot. So I never really actually had a good relationship with my biological dad. In fact, my mom and him kind of got married when they were about 16, 17, and even though they did plan to have me, it was kind of not really the best kind of relationship because, well, my dad would kind of go out and he had a thing for chasing tail, so this is the point where he kind of was more into the drugs and the reputation of being a badass and stuff like that. So really the only time that I actually got to see him, because there was a couple points where I guess he got all messed up and or whatnot, and was like hanging me over like a balcony threatening to drop me when I was crying when I was a little baby or whatnot. And I guess that's what kind of one of the things that got my mom to get the heck out of there and just kind of move in with my grandma and whatnot. So I never really got to see my biological dad that much. And, I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of kids or whatnot that, have kind of been in the same position or whatnot, and you can definitely tell that it does affect kids, especially other boys, I noticed too, because you could definitely tell that they may not have had a lot of, like, experience or, with kind of, like, male growing up, kind of like the stuff that you learn when you're going sports and stuff like that. But luckily, I was able, like, after living kind of like on a farm and just outside of Acton for a bit, they had all kinds of cool animals or whatnot that they, this is at the time when they had like a bunch of like they had like donkeys, they had like a petting zoo or whatnot, and they had a bunch of like different animals there and whatnot. And at one point I actually had a pet raccoon when I was about like 2 years old or whatnot, and it was kind of interesting because they have like old like VCR footage of me with the old tapes, like eating my food and like feeding the raccoon or whatnot. But they had to get rid of the raccoon when it hit the age of sexual maturity, because then it really didn't want to be anyone's friend and just wanted to find other female raccoons, if you know what I mean. But it was kind of an interesting experience. That was around when I was about like 2, 3-ish, and my mom was doing the best she could, and she never got any child support from my dad because he was like, screw that, I'm out of here. I like pretty much like heard from him every now and then. I got like I think a pair of like those like Nikes, of like the ones where it was, or Adidas or something. What were the ones where they had like those little, no, LA Gear, yeah, those stupid shoes where they had like the light things that were all the rage at the time. That's pretty much like the really only gift I got from him. I saw him in jail a couple times, which was kind of interesting. And but I mean, my mom was pretty cool that way, because she was just more about keeping like a kind of a conversation or whatnot. And I was kind of lucky, because eventually I ended up meeting not beating, but meeting my stepdad, Richard Holmes. Richard Frank Holmes is his full name. And yeah, it was kind of interesting, because at that time it was a small town called Acton, Ontario. Most people have probably never heard of or whatnot, but it was kind of like a bit of a mix of like small town, kind of like rivalries and people who knew people kind of thing. You know, it was a really kind of laid back place, but you know, there were people that had their beefs with each other. And yeah, my mom ended up meeting my stepdad and started dating or whatnot. And you know, I was kind of at the point where, yeah, I think it was about like 4 or 5 or whatnot. I don't know. I have a really bad memory when it comes to stuff, because I moved so many different times and just had so much stuff happen. But you know, it was good. He was definitely old fashioned. There's no doubt about that, because he kind of was raised in like the 50s and 60s and didn't really have like his mom left him and whatnot, and his like he had a brother, I think 3 other sisters. I'm not too sure. I think 2 other sisters, yeah. And so it was really hard for them, because they grew up poor, and they also had a love for the track, and obviously gambling. You know, it's hard when you have just one person in the house trying to pay for stuff. So they kind of grew up poor, you know, and but you know, my dad was kind of streetwise, and so was his brother, and you know, they grew up in Acton, and they had to grow up tough. Unfortunately, you know, it was just one of those things. I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, it was odd for, you know, single parent dwelling, and also kind of like having to raise your kids, and you know, it wasn't one of those things that was really often seen back then. And the fact that it was, you know, the male that was raising the kids, usually, you know, you hear about single moms and whatnot. So there was a bit of a stigma, you know, they got put down a lot for being poor and whatnot, and they learned how to fight, you know. My dad was pretty much, well, you know, like, technically he's my stepdad, but I mean, he raised me ever since I was a kid, and like about 4 or 5 years old, and like, even though I was a little brat, like I did some pretty crazy stupid things when I was younger, and like around that time, because you know how it is when you're a little kid, you know, you're so used to, you know, you never really had like a strong male role model around or whatnot, and you know, you've been kind of raised by off of the mom and grandma's teat, pretty much. You know, it was one of those things where it's like, you know, it was I was like looking for ways to get him out of the picture or whatnot, but I ended up you know, really kind of respecting him after a while, and after, you know, a good number of spankings, and but I mean, like, he did do like good things, you know, like we did go out and do things and whatnot, go to the park and stuff like that, you know. I actually learned a lot about the track too, so they used to take me along there, and you know, back in those days it was kind of more wholesome, like it wasn't as hard to get by as it is nowadays, you know, like with everything going up in cost and just making it really hard for regular people, you know. Like back in the 90s or whatnot, you can still you know, be relatively poor and still live okay, you know. And but I mean, you know, my stepdad did, well, my dad, from now on I'm just going to call him my dad. I'm going to call him my biological dad, my either biological dad or father. But you know, I was raised by him, and also at that time he had his dad, who I knew as Grandpa Bob, and just the nicest guy ever. I mean, thing about Grandpa Bob is that he would pretty much just you know, like, we'd go over for pretty much our day would be I'd go over and hang out with him or whatnot. Like, we'd go over in his like old car, and I can't even remember what it was called. It was like gotta be from the 70s or 80s or whatnot. But we'd go to the park, and we'd just look around on the sides of like ditches and stuff like that, where people would go and drink, all the drinking spots, and we'd pick up like all the empties or whatnot. And so cans, bottles, stuff like that, and we'd go take them in for empties, and then we'd go down and buy like a couple loaves of bread or whatnot, and go feed the ducks. And that was really kind of cool because it kind of made me realize just when I was a kid, you know, just like, oh, well, I can do some, you know, I was feeling useful. And that's what I really kind of liked about it, too. I mean, I also had my grandma and my grandpa on my mom's side of the family, too, which were really awesome because they always helped out, especially before my mom met my stepdad, my dad. You know, they did everything they could to help out with, like, everything from, you know, presents, stuff like that, you know. Silly stuff when you're a kid, it becomes like a, you know, big thing, but once you hit like your older ages, you're just like, oh no, I'm another year closer to death. But you know, I really appreciate that, and I think overall, I think my grandpa on my mom's side of the family is probably the best male role model that I've ever really had in my family. And he's kind of getting old now. It's kind of getting a little bit of dementia and whatnot, and bit of depression because he's been having problems with his knees and stuff, and he's just been in a lot of pain. So you know, I've been trying to cheer him up as much as I can when I talk to him. But anyways, getting back to the acting and being young and all that jazz. At that time I was kind of like, I was acting out before I met my stepdad. In fact, I was a little bastard. I completely had like my dad, like my biological dad's rebellious nature in me, and hated everything about authority. In fact, I was such a little bugger in Catholic school that they kicked me out unless I was on Ritalin. And that was back in the day where, you know, if you had any kid that was hyper or, you know, was being a little pain in the butt, you know, it was like totally fine for, you know, to drug your kid with like mind altering drugs. So I was on that for a bit, but it did kind of turn me into a zombie or whatnot. And then it was kind of good because my mom and my stepdad, well, my dad, ended up after he kind of came into the picture, was like, nah, we're getting him off of this Ritalin shit, and we're just gonna spank him. So, and sure enough, it actually worked out pretty good. I mean, I'm not gonna, don't get me wrong, I mean, my dad definitely had kind of old-fashioned, you know, side to him, and a few times where, yeah, it kind of went over the line with kind of the physical violence. But, you know, I mean, I definitely, growing up, he taught me the difference between right and wrong, and the value of, you know, working and being part of something. And I really kind of enjoyed that. I mean, there was plenty of times we had where I'd go and, you know, we'd go down to the track or whatnot, and I'd go pick up tickets and stuff like that. So I definitely learned about the horse racing at a very young age. But that was kind of like their thing, you know. I mean, even though we were poor and you know, I guess you could call it a borderline gambling addiction, we, you know, was still able to go out to like Mohawk and stuff. And you also have to keep in mind too that kind of like the Ontario licensed gaming and horse racing kind of industry back in the 90s was a lot more family oriented. Like they would have things at Mohawk where they would have like community events where they'd have like bobbing for apples, and they'd only have like maybe 3 or 4 races kind of thing. It was mostly a family event. They had you know, all kinds of stuff in the community where anybody could come of all ages and stuff, and it was a great place to actually meet kids, because I'd go there Friday. I'd actually look forward to going on Fridays and Saturdays or whatnot, because I'd see other people there and stuff. And you know, as a kid, you don't really see the whole hey, how come we don't have like as much food, or we're just like living off the spaghetti for a week or two? You know, like you don't really notice it as a kid that you're like being grown up on like kind of shitty carbohydrates and cheap stuff. But you know, when my dad did win, you know, he'd like take us out or we'd do something nice or whatnot. But I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty bad. Like getting $5 out of him was like, oh man, pulling teeth sometimes. But it got to the point where, you know, it made me realize that yeah, I can go out and do my own kind of things like that. And even at a young age, we used to, my dad used to find all kinds of different like side jobs and whatnot. In fact, one point we used to, oh geez, it was crazy. We'd go out like for the Guelph penny saver at like 3 o'clock in the morning and out in the farmland, and we had this like system where I had like he'd drive up to the mailbox without hitting it. Well, sometimes we'd end up smoking the damn thing when it was in the wintertime, but for the most part we did pretty good. And you know, it's just like miles and miles of doing that for about 3-4 hours on a Saturday morning. And at the time I was kind of angry, because I'm like, hey man, like there's some good cartoons on right now as a kid, and just being like, why are we out here? And it was kind of funny too, because a couple of times we'd be out kind of like out in the middle of nowhere, and then my dad would like start smoking some weed while we're driving and delivering papers. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. It just smelled freaking awful to me as a kid, right? And then a couple times we would go out there, and we'd be out in the middle of like a farmer, like, well, next to a farmer's field, and there'd be some cows. And then my dad would roll down the window and start making like these weird calf noises that made it like sounded like there was a wounded calf. So all the cows would start coming to the freaking side of the fence, and it was just hilarious. So there was a lot of good times to it too. It was kind of like, you know, growing up old school, I guess, but definitely made me have more of appreciation of things. But getting back to the racetrack kind of thing, there was a time when it was kind of more family oriented. Now it's just kind of like Ontario Licensed Gaming took it completely over and turned it into like where it was the casino and slots, and just really took the heart and soul out of gambling, you know, and turned it into the soulless machine that it is today. And you can go to like Woodbine and stuff like that nowadays, but it's really not the same as what it used to be. And you know, that was kind of interesting. I mean, the thing was, my dad kind of had like a lot of different kind of like issues or whatnot, but he'd always try to find some work or whatnot. So, but the thing is, we ended up moving a lot. In fact, like, it got to the point where I think by the time I got to high school, they have like your permanent record file folder or whatnot, and I was like one of the few kids that they've seen in like 10 years that had both sides of the freaking folder, like with all these different school stamps, because I moved so many times. In fact, I think it was up to like 26 or 28 times by the time I was in high school. And there was even like parts, because we ended up going up to like BC and stuff like that, and that's a whole different school system, so they had like different parts on there where they didn't even know where I was. So it was kind of like interesting there. But yeah, we moved all across pretty much southern Ontario, you know. Dad would always try to go for trucking jobs and stuff, so that was kind of what he liked to do. And so a lot of the times we ended up moving to different places, and there's a bit of a good thing and bad thing about it. I mean, I always kind of envied kids that, you know, have always grown up in like a certain spot, or have known people in their neighborhood for, you know, ever since they were knee-high to a grasshopper kind of thing, you know. It always kind of intrigued me because, well, it got to the point where I think we were moving like once or twice, even sometimes 3 times in a year. It was just getting to the point where it was like kind of getting a little taxing, you know, because I mean, it kind of developed me with like people skills and stuff, because I was able to, you know, pretty much get to know people and like have that kind of extrovert personality. But you know, at certain times too, I kind of realized, hey, I'm not really going to be here for too long, so there's really no point in me making friends, or, you know, I'd like kind of be like cool with people and stuff like that, and like I'd always go and like to the park or whatnot, meet friends that way. There was always different fads like Pokemon or Pogs, stuff like that, you know. It was always kind of like back before we had the internet and stuff. And it was one thing I always think is kind of ridiculous. They always try to like lump my age category, where I'm like, you know, like around my like early 30s now, into like the same bracket as millennials. And I think that's not fair, because like, I mean, the age of technology, like 30 years is a huge difference. I mean, I consider myself like born in the 80s, but I like grew up a 90s kid. You know, I mean, there was a time in the 90s where like, you know, you actually had to go outside to meet people. You know, you couldn't just go on Facebook and just like, or Instagram or any of that crap. And if you tried to bring like a laptop to school, like, you know, like, or like even like the oldest, like one of the first versions of laptops to school, the teachers would like automatically take away from you, because they're like, oh, we don't want to have the liability of this breaking. And now they're like doing nothing but like teaching stuff online and whatnot for like my brother and sister and stuff, and they're in the same millennial category as me. I definitely do not agree with that whatsoever, because then like the Gen Xers after the baby boomers, and even that I think is a bit of a huge gap. What, from like was it like the late 50s to the like 80s or whatnot, or something like that? I don't know. That's still a large gap there. I mean, there's still obviously discrepancies in that generation thing, but I guess, you know, maybe it's just the way that they go. They try to do it by every 30 years now. But I mean, you look at the way technology is now, it's, you know, 15 years is pretty much a better representation of new generations. Because, I mean, like, I never really, I mean, like, I was getting out of high school when Facebook became really a thing. It was mostly MySpace, and even then most people didn't really, use it where I was, here in Canada. I mean, they mostly have, like, phones that you'd, like, phone people. That was pretty much it. But there was a time it was worth it to wake up on a Saturday morning, and they had, like, good lineups of cartoons, the Batman animated series, all the stuff now that they're, like, from the 80s and the 90s that they're trying to, like, either redo or, like, make into movies and stuff like that, or to capitalize on, like, that nostalgia. That was a wonderful time, and in a certain way the 90s was also kind of like an innocent time too, because just the way that, like, the clothes was, the writing for the shows was just really corny, but, like, tried to teach you, like, moral lessons and a lot of the stuff. I think that was kind of like the last age, really, and also they had, like, grunge and Nirvana and stuff like that. Like, I was still really young to understand that kind of, until I started, like, getting more into my older years or whatnot. But it was kind of interesting, to kind of grow up in the 90s. And when you compare it to, like, the millennium and, like, nowadays, it's, I don't know, maybe just, getting that whole thing where you get the old man syndrome back in my day, but it really does feel that pop music or TV is just really kind of meant for people with, like, the attention of, like, a goldfish, pretty much. It's, like, well, I mean, like they say, the memory of a goldfish, but apparently I've seen some studies. There's some goldfish that can be trained to actually, like, remember stuff and go through, like, obstacles and stuff like that. So maybe I'm laying it a little too hard on the goldfish population there. But it was interesting because I moved around a lot, so sometimes I get to, like, if I knew I was going to be in a place for too long, for whatever reason, if it was like a temporary job my dad had or whatnot, I would pretend to be, like, play it off as, like, the dark and mysterious kid, or sometimes I'd just be the class clown. And I actually found that the more humorous kind of being, like, a goofball was kind of, like, the way that really, no matter where I went, I mean, I was going to get made fun of because I was always a big kid anyways, but I was always active too. I mean, I was actually pretty medium at, like, a lot of sports and teams that I tried out for and stuff, so I did keep myself pretty active. And my dad also tried to make sure that we did, like, stuff like playing football and whatnot, so I always, like, was a big kid, but they got me involved in like sports when I could, and also kind of taught me how to, like, play softball and stuff. I was doing, like, the windmill style underhand, and also, like, oh geez, sorry, like, being out in, like, left and right field, or I played different positions on the team or whatnot that I was pretty good at, but I was pretty well rounded in the most part. Had good hand-eye coordination and stuff like that, so it was just kind of interesting that way. I mean, despite all the stuff that, times that my dad would kind of get drunk and come home and we'd end up, like, going through some crazy fights between my mom and him or whatnot, and a lot of the times we ended up actually moving, not so much because of his jobs, but because my dad would kind of either tie one on and get into a fight with my mom, or he'd kind of blow our rent money on the horse races. But yeah, I don't want to, like, talk too much bad about him, because even though it was kind of stuff that I would never do to my kids now, because I've kind of learned better, and I've never gotten that whole aggressive, like, hitting woman or anything like that. I mean, there's a couple times during, like, relationships or whatnot when you get into arguments, or like, you push people away and stuff, but it's like I've never really lost my, like, temper and full out, like, beat the crap out of my significant other. I always knew that was, like, wrong, and you learn from seeing all that stuff, from kind of growing up in that kind of environment. Like, I knew not to piss my dad off, that's for sure. And it was kind of one of those things where I ended up moving a lot because of it, and it did kind of affect me as a kid, because I wasn't really able to make, like, long lasting relationships. It was kind of hard for me to kind of tell people about that stuff, because, well, if you tell anyone about the stuff that goes on, then sure enough, the Children's Aid Service gets called or whatnot, and I don't know. I was also kind of a little bit of a badass too, like a little bit of a problem child, because I used to act out in ways, and like there was times where like I ended up like hitting a teacher because she like took away dinosaurs that my grandpa gave me before he died. So you know, I was kind of like not gonna mess around with that. You know, I'm like, give me my freaking dinosaurs back, and yeah, so I was a little bit of a bastard. Sometimes I'd flip out and stuff, and you know, wasn't really too good for me. And I guess they were kind of suspectful of stuff like that. But we moved so many different times that really there wasn't much of an investigation or anything like that. And to be honest with you, I really don't believe that Children's Aid Service, like I've seen so many different, because my mom was also going through kind of like some MS like symptoms or whatnot that was diagnosed by actual doctors and stuff. So we were kind of like going to stay in kind of like we stayed in a lot of subsidized housing. And you know, not like a lot of people say, oh well, you know, obviously it's like subsidized housing, so you're gonna deal with a lot more people that don't really kind of give a damn, or really are able to kind of pay things, you know, like bills and stuff like that, without kind of resorting to spending a lot of it on drugs and stuff. And yeah, there was those cases, you know, there was those people in the neighborhood, or you know, don't go around them or whatnot, or they, you know, had like little bastards for kids because they weren't raising them properly. And I'd end up usually like getting into a fight with them because I'd never really, you know, put up with that crap as a kid. I was always kind of very strong-willed and always stood my ground just because, well, my dad taught me that, you know. I mean, it was, you know, many times where I was like, one point when I was like 12 years old, I got into a fight with a 16-year-old kid and held my ground. Another time I got my shit kicked out of me. Well, this is back when I was like in Guelph. I must have been around 9 years old or whatnot. And my little sister was about like, geez, I think she was like 3 or 4 at the time, and they had me watching her at the park, and my little sister was like, I don't know if she was like, I can't even really remember what she was doing. I think she was like, I don't know, like, I don't know, singing or something like that, or something that pissed off this one kid's brother who was 16, and so this like 16-year-old fucking punk decided to say that if my sister didn't shut the F up, then he was gonna beat the crap out of her. And so those were fighting words. I didn't give a shit. So I got into a fight with him, even though he overpowered me, and you know, I was bleeding all over him pretty much. I didn't give a shit. You know, I'd rather get my ass kicked than anything happen to my sister. And you know, being the oldest, I've always kind of, you know, even though like technically, like my sister and my brother are technically my half brother and half sister, to me they are my brother and sister. Like I would fucking do anything for them. You know, I mean, they mean a lot to me, and they are my family. And ever since I was a kid, I did everything I could to protect them. You know, and just kind of being the older brother. If there was any kind of that crap, I would not have any. I would not put up with it at all. You know, yeah, I kind of had a temper that way. And hey, you know, most of the times especially when I got stronger and got to the point where I knew how to fight properly, you know, my dad actually, after he saw me get my ass kicked when I was like 9 years old by like a 16-year-old, there was other times too where I was like 12 and I beat it with 16-year-olds, and when I was about 12, 13, I became a fucking tank. But aside from that, you know, it was kind of interesting. But we moved around a lot and stuff, like I said before, and a few of the places I went to, like I think kind of one of the places that really kind of messed me up was, I think it was about like around, I think it was like 8 or 9 or around that age or whatnot. Yeah, it's just kind of like school how it is, where even though I was young, I was kind of interested in girls, but I was also kind of like, you know, a bit of a crazy badass too. Like, I always be really cocky and kind of the class clown. So there's this girl named Sheila Sutherland. I think she was kind of like the first girl I ever really kind of had a thing for and whatnot, and we're really good friends and stuff. And I think she was the first girl I ever really kissed, but it was never like a tongue thing. It was more like on the cheek or whatnot, and I really did like her. And yeah, it was in Guelph, I think, when I lived in like the Victoria Road North or whatnot. There's a few places I lived there, but like I said, I moved around so many different times. It was pretty crazy. And what kind of pissed me off was, and I kind of held it as a resentful thing deep down inside, as kind of like a really disappointment kind of thing, is it was like the night before my birthday, and my dad ended up kind of getting way too hammered, and then took all the rent money, and went to the track and completely lost it all. And so not only did he come back telling my mom, oh, I don't have the money, but he told her that, you know, I guess they got into a fight or something. And so I ended up spending my birthday in a women's shelter in Cambridge. Was not a fun experience whatsoever. And around like a bunch of really fucked up people, and it really kind of hurt because I had kind of a party planned, and I told all my friends at school and stuff, and I invited them. And this was like the very next day. My mom and me were in Cambridge, and my dad wakes up, and he kind of told me this way later when I was out in British Columbia, out in Nelson. He said that he regretted it. He said, like the next day, he had Sheila and a few other people who I considered really, really good friends, really cool people. Like, there was like a dude from the Bahamas named Ricardo or whatnot, who was like a black kid, but he was really cool. And I had a lot of fun, and I was like, like every time I went to different schools, like I would always kind of like find the people who were kind of like outcasted and stuff, because like, I don't know, when you move around a lot and you're like a big kid and you come to a new place, you're gonna get picked on, for one. So I got kind of to the point where I just learned to deal with it, or laughed it off, or became a bit of a clown, right? That back in those days and stuff like that, it was all about fads. It was all about being like everyone else. So people who were kind of like different, or had like a funny kind of outlook on life, or didn't really go with the grain. Like me, I was actually a pretty gifted kid. In fact, a couple times they had me go into like do advanced stuff like that, but they said, oh, because I didn't have a really good social thing. But that was mostly because I knew I wasn't going to be staying in a place for long, so I really didn't converse with a lot of kids unless I went to a place where it was really cool. I mean, there's places where I went to, like I went to Brookville, which is like a real kind of like country bumpkin school in the middle of nowhere. I got bussed out to. I think it's around Rockwood or whatnot, or the Mohawk area there. And I was a little bastard. In fact, it got to the point where like I became a legend in that school. Like, after I left, I ended up bumping into one of the kids at like, I think at Mohawk or whatnot. And like, even like 4 years after I went to that school, I was a freaking like, there was like my name was like whispered amongst the hushes. And it was all because I would do crazy stuff. Like, we'd have like, how like they had like the snowball fights and stuff like that in the wintertime. Well, they had like this crazy hill in Brookville, and what we did is we made like they had people that would make snow forts at the bottom of the hill because it was easier for them to roll the snowballs down there. But I was a big kid, so I had no problem like rolling the snowballs up the hill when they got really big with like a couple other kids. They're like, holy crap, this guy's strong. And so what we would do is we'd make these snow forts, and at the time I was like, I don't know why. I was just really good at building snow forts. And we'd like make it so that it was like these ice kingdoms. We'd have like an ice wall around it, and then we'd have another spot where we'd have like these little like side ramparts. And once the teachers knew what we were doing, they kind of like shut us down a couple of times. But we managed to find ways around it where we'd like make it like we'd have like the solid ice wall on the top part, and then we'd have like inside bits where we would like have like softer snow where we keep the snowballs so it wouldn't look obvious. And then we take these giant snowballs that were like kid size pretty much, and we'd start rolling them down the hill and like smashing into other people's freaking snow forts. Like, we were fucking vicious. We did not care. It was some good times. And like, I don't know, I got into a lot of trouble with the teachers and stuff, and I think one time I made like a weird like scavenger hunt during recess, and like was like, oh geez, what's this? And like, just weird stuff that I would do when the kids came in there. It would just completely distract from class. It's like a teacher's not going to be able to teach a thing when you got like, a bunch of like weird stuff and like clues around around the classroom, because then the teacher's kind of like, what the hell's going on here? What this says go over? What's this riddle over here? And I was actually really smart about it. Like we'd waste about a good 15-20 minutes, or I'd end up oh man, I really got in trouble one time. Where they had one of these doors for the for where you open up like into the classroom, and the it had like kind of like a V track on, but it was on the inside of the door, and on the outside of the door, when you opened it, the V thing would open, and then anybody that was walking into the classroom, I have a freaking small bucket, like a little tiny little plastic pail, and I managed to get some like glitter and stuff and just put it on there and just glitter bombed the teacher when she walked in before. And it was really crazy because I kind of had to like, I had to make sure that I was on top of a chair, and I kind of had to like slowly make sure that the thing wasn't gonna fall off when I like closed the door. I was really smart about it, and she did not like that. A few other times too, we kind of like made a couple of substitute teachers' lives a living hell. So yeah, I wasn't really a friend of teachers at that time in that school. And I think at one point I like pissed them off so much that they had me shoveling the like the ice rink out front of the school. And like one time I got pissed off and put salt on there. But that was also the time too, around that time I kind of we ended up moving because my grandma actually had a fire at her farmhouse, which was pretty messed up. And at that point they had moved on the they transferred all their pets and stuff. Like they had like giraffes, they had all kinds of different animals like donkeys and stuff. And it was weird because they actually had to get rid of the animals because some weirdo, some satanic group or whatnot was like one actually like jumped over into like got into our barn and slit like a fucking donkey or sheep's throat or something like that for the blood. And my nan was just like, no, we're not having animals here, because it's, you know, these people are targeting, like they were targeting people who had like petting zoos and stuff like that, or animals and livestock. So we and they ended up giving it over to the African Lion Safari and I think the Toronto Zoo and a couple other places too. So my aunt managed to at least get her money back from that. But there was a time where we had a good petting zoo, and so what my grandma did after that was kind of before the fire, she had a costume business where she would sew all these costumes and stuff like that and rent them out, and people knew where to go. Like, we were really popular in Acton and Rockwood and whatnot. And in fact, one time they actually got me into a summer camp because I went to Edgewood and Brebeuf, and Brebeuf was kind of a Christian thing. And you see, because I was kind of in that mode where I would like pretend I was someone or like, you know. So okay, Edgewood, what did I do? What did I do in Edgewood? Oh yeah, Edgewood, I pretended I was talking in my sleep and like started talking about like killing my family and shit. Like, was not serious whatsoever. Like, I love my family. I was just totally fucking with the counselors because they're kind of assholes. Like 16, 17, they were just about chasing other counselors for tail. They really didn't care about the fact that they had like, you know, 9, 10, 12-year-olds kind of having to watch them or whatnot. So yeah, I did kind of do some pretty crazy things out there. And yeah, I was kind of, I don't know, Brebeuf was kind of interesting, but I think I did the same. I was pretty much just a little badass. The thing was, I kind of fucked myself over because the summer camp called Children's Aid, and so we kind of had to deal with those assholes for a few months or whatnot until they realized everything was fine. I was living with my grandparents at that time, and so I got in a lot of trouble. But yeah, anyways, aside from all those ridiculous things I used to do, and one time I was at that school I was talking about, the where was it again? Oh, not Brebeuf, but anyways, the school I was talking about where I became like a bit of a pain in the butt or whatnot. So I moved so many different times. It's crazy. My grandma actually got a fire. What happened was she had like this farmhouse that I used to go back and forth to because Mom and my dad would be fighting and stuff. You know, I would kind of yeah, it was kind of interesting because like we got a phone call, and sure enough they had a fire or whatnot. At the same time, my grandma was kind of like doing she bought a restaurant in Hillsburg, and so I think it was around I was like 9 or 10 or whatnot. So It was kind of interesting. No, I think it was about 10 or 11 actually. It's hard to remember where I was for all the different parts and moving around and all that jazz. And yeah, she ended up losing the farmhouse, which is really sad because what happened was she had like a wood stove in there, but they've had the farmhouse for so long that they forgot that they have to clean the thing up, and I guess a bunch of wood and ash and stuff like that kind of got stuck up in the top part of the wood stove, and so it caught on fire, and it was pretty sad because we lost everything in that. And good thing though, my grandma managed to get all the animals out. At that time we had like 5 cats and like 4 dogs or something ridiculous like that, because we were out in the farm. And my grandma, she kind of really loved animals and stuff like that, and since we didn't have the pets, the petting zoo, she would just adopt pets from the help out with the humane society that they had in Rockwood and stuff like that, because she couldn't bear to see animals get put down and stuff like that. So she was really kind of she had a big heart that way. She still does, even though they're like really old now. They've still got a couple cats and whatnot and all that jazz. And yeah, no, it was really sad. So we ended up moving to Hillsburg, and I ended up living in like the top part of where they had this restaurant, and it was a cool kind of thing because like there was like a right across from it there was a hockey arena, and I actually liked living in Hillsburg. It was pretty cool. It was like part of the baseball team, and it was interesting. But then we decided just kind of randomly to go out to BC, so that was kind of cool. So I ended up going in like grandpa's car that my dad stole, and I didn't know about this till like afterwards when we were already out there, and it was kind of sad because that was when my grandpa Bob ended up dying. He had a heart attack when he was out in Woodstock, where I'm currently located. So I've definitely doxed myself there for anybody who, well, not that I really give a shit what people think or say or do, because it's not like they can really do anything that I haven't done to myself already. So yeah, I don't mind. There's just a flying around everywhere. But yeah, we went out west, and it was kind of interesting because there was times where like the vehicle was like so damn old that we actually had to like push it to get it to start. And at that time, I was like having to push this like car, and so we had to always park it on like a hill or whatnot. And so we were living out in Burnaby for a bit, and it was kind of interesting because just totally random chance ended up bumping into my biological dad out there, and he was with some weird lady named Jera, who grew up in like a weird like cult in the States and whatnot. Like she was really messed up. She had some serious issues. But my dad was a bit of a control freak anyway, so I guess he was like the supreme cult leader. I don't know of that relationship, but it was interesting because like at that time, like the last time I had seen my dad, it was like freaking in jail, and the whole time he was like had some like chick there trying to smuggle him drugs. So it was like my mom was like, all right, Roy, we're getting out of here, because he really didn't give a shit about really talking to me. It was just more of a cover to oh, my son's coming in and my girlfriend's going to be there too to visit, freaking conjugal visits. 1 second, stupid fly is trying to get on the camera. But yeah, so that was kind of interesting to say the least. But it kind of sucked, but I kind of had a thing where, I don't know, being kind of like badass, and I kind of had like this like weird kind of respect for my dad because I knew he was like a biker, and I knew he was like involved in some weird shit and like some like hardcore stuff. I didn't actually find out about it until I was like older, but I'll get to that later. I'm giving you my whole life story here. But yeah, so it was kind of interesting because all of a sudden you wanted to be in my life, because I was about 12 or this is like 12 or around that age, yeah. And so at that time my stepdad was like, he raised me, so he was like, he was afraid that my real dad would actually just take me. But no, my dad actually had a biological dad had respect and whatnot for my stepdad and stuff, and he knew that he could raise me better and whatnot. So my stepdad let us go out, and we'd go for trips and stuff like that. He had like an old like Dodge van or whatnot that had some like cool like some like cool like laser stuff, like 80s kind of like stuff on the side of his van. He was one of those dudes. But it was kind of cool because like I was a kid and I thought it was like awesome to have like a camper van that could go anywhere. Like we went to like Whistler and different places like that. So yeah, I got to actually kind of see it. That was before it became like completely commercial. Like Whistler was actually like a decent place with like different parts. Now it's just a place where rich people go and just bitch about how better they are than everyone else. So, you know, like, it was kind of cool. Got to see a lot of, like, BC that way and stuff. And so I kind of had you know, a lot more respect for my biological dad. But then we ended up moving back because that was when we found out that my step-grandpa, or Grandpa Bob, ended up having a heart attack in Woodstock. And so we were out in Burnaby for a bit, and we ended up moving back, and for the funeral and stuff like that. And it definitely changed my dad. I definitely realized that for sure, because, you know, before it was like he'd go to the track just because it was like him and his dad. It was a thing that he did. But then he didn't have his dad anymore, and then I think it really kind of turned into just he used to go to the track, and the gambling kind of became a thing. Not just because he loved the horses, but because it reminded him of the time that he had with his dad, you know. And I kind of felt bad for him because he never really knew his mom until, you know, she came into his life actually fairly later. And we actually had a really bad relationship with her because she hated me and my brother and sister and stuff. And like his sisters, you know, we'd have like one that was really nice to us and another one that was kind of nice to us, but still kind of like very fake. And at least that's what it felt like to me, because like, I mean, I grew up poor, but we also would like, we knew the value of like hard work and stuff like that when we could. Well, and I know it was kind of funny to say that because you know, you have parents that have like gambling problems. Mom kind of liked her bingo and stuff like that, but she was on disability, so she didn't really have a lot of money anyways. So when she did go out, it was kind of like a thing, you know. But my dad kind of made it a thing where he would rather try his luck at the races than pay rent. So yeah, it became a bit of an issue. And we ended up moving to Niagara Falls. And around that time, I was about, I think I was about like 12, 13-ish. You know, I was around somewhere there. And I started rebelling. You know, I started listening to Korn, and parents didn't like that whatsoever, and getting into like the whole goth thing. You know, like putting like my hair up and stuff like that in spikes, which really did not look good at first. And, you know, kind of like got in with some like sketchy people and stuff like that. And then at that time I started really kind of fighting with my stepdad, you know, because well, there's, to be honest with you, I kind of got to that point where, you know, when you get kind of preteen, and I was smart enough to know what was going on with my house, you know, like like 2001, when people, no, was it 2000? Yeah, for the millennium, when people were like afraid that their computers were gonna go back and, you know, like the robot uprising. My dad came in, my mom locked my dad out, and he ended up breaking into the house in a drunken rage. And I was in my room with my mom, and we were terrified. She had the door locked, and he was beating like the inside part of the door to my room, to the point where it was like huge freaking, kind of like the door was like caved right in for a good a decent, like, I'm surprised he didn't break through. I guess he just kind of hurt his wrist and went to bed, and that was that. So that was kind of messed up. And so after that, I started kind of rebelling. I kind of got into some arguments with my dad, and I'd punch some holes in the wall too. Yeah, I was kind of getting to that violent thing where I knew it was wrong, and I knew they were kind of hypocritical, and I was just kind of hating everything, really. You know, just kind of thought everything was unfair and, you know, unjust, and that they were all hypocrites. And to a certain degree they were and whatnot, but, you know, I mean, I had to kind of realize what life was for myself. And so I ended up running away from home. I got in with some pretty sketchy people, and even though I was like 13, I was doing coke. I was doing a lot of fucking shit. It was not good. Like, it got to the point, because they knew that I was under the age of 16, I kind of got in with like a group of people where they were doing drug deals and stuff like that, and anybody who would screw them over, they'd send me out with a baseball bat, and I'd fuck them up pretty much. They'd always tell me to go for the kneecaps, and at that time I had a trench coat, and I kept a Louisville Slugger on the inside of it. Nobody could really tell until I took it out. So we used to hang out a lot at Niagara Falls. That's where I was living at that time. And we lived on McLeod Road, 6560, like this like weird old house that like had like a dungeon in the basement. Like I was kind of like it was a really sketchy place. I always thought it was haunted or whatnot. That's why I'd never go downstairs. I always got a creepy feeling from it. Like that's probably where they kept like prisoners from the War of 1812 or something. But I used to go down to the falls and stuff like that, hang out, and they'd have like fireworks every Friday. So pretty much what it was just kind of a place where I would escape with people and stay out all night. And school was just really not really a thing. Like I did manage to graduate, and it was kind of weird because like graduation thing, it was like a 7, 8, 9 school, which is like a middle school kind of thing. No, it wasn't a 7, 8, 9. It was a grade. It went up from like K to 7 or whatnot, or K to 8 or something. I can't, something like stupid like that. I think it was like grade 7 or 8 or whatnot. And so it was kind of like one of those, like, they had like a prom thing, but it wasn't really a prom. It was like to go into like high school, and I don't know, it was weird because at that time I was kind of like, I kind of cared about, the whole looking good and stuff, because you're a preteen, you're a kid, especially a male, and never really had like nice things and stuff like that. But I kind of asked them, like, hey, is there any way I could get like a, like some sort of like nice dress shirt or something like that, or like I knew like a tux rental was way out of the question or whatnot, and they're like, oh yeah, no problem and whatnot. And so sure enough, day comes along, everyone's all like dressed up in like nice outfits, and then you got me with just like a like a freaking t-shirt, and I looked so out of place or whatnot. And like, I don't know, it was one of those times where I really kind of felt like kind of just like completely alienated. Like, it was like everyone was kind of like, oh, you should have like, and I'm like, what, this is like grade 7 I think, or grade 8, or I don't know, one of those years. I didn't really take it seriously, and but for some reason it really did bug me, and I was kind of like when everyone was having like their thing, I kind of went over to the side and actually kind of cried a bit. It kind of bugged me because I kind of felt let down from my folks and stuff. And then my mom kind of came over and saw, and she said she kind of like, even to this day, she really regrets that. But I mean, like, hey, it wasn't like, during the winter time and stuff, I would do things like I would go out and shovel driveways. Like I loved shoveling driveways as a kid, because it was like, as soon as I saw enough snow, I was out there with a shovel making just money hand over fist. But I wasn't the kind of person that was, I'd take my money, or I was also kind of like not really smart. I should have probably saved it or got a bank account or whatnot. But what I'd do is I'd go out there, I'd shovel for like a good 5-6 hours, come home with like $50-$60 or maybe more sometimes. You get the odd time where if you go there regularly enough and you get old people that really, you get like a $20 tip instead of for a $5 driveway. Because back in those days, I actually did a thing which actually kind of got me a lot of respect, is I would do a donation thing. And so sometimes there'd be, pensioners or whatnot, and I actually had a really decent service as a kid. It was actually something I was very proud of. Like, I tried chocolate bar selling during the summertime. Ended up going into debt for that, and I eat most of the damn chocolate bars because nobody wants to buy chocolate during the damn summer. It was a win-win situation for the freaking company, because they know the kids are going to eat the damn chocolate bars anyways, just make their parents pay for it. But like I found snow shovel was kind of like back-breaking labor that always got me a decent amount of money, and it was something I was good at. And I did some like newspaper jobs and stuff like that too, but it never really pays you that much. It's as opposed to actually going out with a shovel and doing like hard labor, because you can actually get away with it. It's not child labor if you're shoveling people's driveways. But anyways, to the good part of what I didn't really like rip people off or anything like that. I did a thing where I would have like a donation. So sometimes I would even shovel like old people's driveways for free, and then they would just pay me at the end of the month or when they got paid, kind of thing. And I was totally fine with that because like I felt good doing it. You know, I knew that I was doing a service for people, and you know, I was able to bring back money at home at night. And many times I'd be like, "Mom, you're not cooking tonight. I'm buying pizza, or I'm buying something, you know, food for everyone." And that was my brother and my sister, and we're still really little. And I think it was around the time when my brother was born, I think, because there's like a 8-year difference between my sister and a 12-year difference between my brother. And so, you know, like I would always kind of try to, you know, I'd be like, and there was times where I'd be like, "Hey Mom, you know, you want to go to bingo or whatnot?" Because at that, you know, at that time it was only like $40 to go for, you know, to buy like 2 cards or whatnot for the night. Or they also had this other kind of cool thing where it was like a legal way to like gamble as a kid, where they had these like Kiwanis groups, where it was like a local kind of like Optimist Club thing, where they'd have like a group where they'd have like a TV bingo thing where you could like buy cards and stuff from like different stores. And so obviously I'd like get a card for myself even though my mom was buying it, and so it was kind of our thing, right? So I like played bingo and stuff, so it was kind of fun. Even my dad would sometimes join in too, because it was a family thing, and it was technically gambling, but TV bingo. So you know, so like stuff like that, you know, it was the little things, you know. So I mean, there definitely was a lot of love in my family. There was never, I mean, there was like some physical violence, there was some like verbal violence and stuff like that, but it was never to the point where, you know, like when you talk to people who have like sexual violence and stuff like that, or you know, like that or you know, those kind of people have like like almost like you can't even fix that kind of damage when it's a total betrayal of trust and stuff like that. There was absolutely none of that crap. It was just mostly physical, normal, old-fashioned, kind of like Roseanne, but a little bit more old school, kind of traditional dysfunctional family values, you know. And hey, there's a lot of people that, you know, you can't pick your parents or whatnot, and people make do with what they got. But we found a lot of times where, you know, where we did have, you know, or I'd go and back when Blockbuster was a thing, you know, I'd take the money from sorry, my back's acting up on me here. You know, I'd take the money from working or shoveling and stuff, and you know, I'd give Dad money for the track sometimes, or sometimes he would take the money, and I just kind of had to deal with it. But I think that's what kind of led to me kind of acting out and stuff like that too, and getting into the wrong crowd, because I did a lot of messed up stuff that I totally regret doing. And even now, you know, looking back on it, it was kind of interesting. This was going through that whole phase of like living in Niagara Falls. They had like the Screaming Tunnel where I'd go with like my friends and stuff, and we'd go hang out there to like see if there's never anything weird that happened there or whatnot. Just a creepy feeling, like hair just like standing up the back of your neck kind of thing. But one place that I have to say in Niagara Falls where it actually really did feel really creepy, and I actually got like really creeped out, and it wasn't the drugs, was going to hang out at like 2 o'clock in the morning at the actual Lundy's Lane, where they had the battle from one of the battles from the Warriors of 1812, and like it felt like people died there, and it was like really creepy at that night too, because it was like a fog was kind of going through the field too, so it really did feel like I didn't hear any like, you know, ghost battles or anything like that. It felt like somebody died there, you know. I kind of was getting into the whole spiritual side of things and whatnot, and ghosts and stuff like that. That was always kind of interesting me. It still does to this day. I keep an open mind about that stuff. And around this time too, like my parents always tried to like go to church every now and then. Like they'd have like these like kind of like periods where they'd be like, we're Christians, and then there was periods where they're just like, we don't really give a damn. So there was a lot of times where I'd go to like different churches and stuff like that, and really for me it was like I wasn't really a Christian, and like I don't know, it was kind of more just a place to go to youth groups to like hit on Christian chicks, but they were like I mean, I kind of got dates and stuff, but it was like you're really not going to be able to do anything with like when you're that age. You're like way too young, so it's like they're waiting to get married anyways, right? But I mean, it didn't stop me from you know, like from, you know, so that was kind of interesting. never really had any like sexual things that came out of it or whatnot, but that was more like when I went out to BC and stuff. And so what happened was, I think this was around when I was like 13, well, yeah, about 13, and what happened was my dad out in BC was like, hey, my biological dad was like, well, he can come out here to Chilliwack or whatnot, and I kind of was like all for it, because at that time I had done some pretty messed up stuff. In fact, I was kind of babysitting this one family next door, and like I was all messed up on drugs and shit. I was kind of like hitting on the 16-year-old shit that was like, she was not really like she had like an 18-year-old or 19-year-old boyfriend, but I was like totally hitting on her and whatnot, and was like messing around with like knives and shit, trying to like impress her. And while I was babysitting, and so kind of well, after kind of doing a little bit of coke, so before I went over there. And anyways, my parents found out about it, and they knew I was like into some bad stuff, and so they thought it was a good idea for me to go out west. And actually, to be honest with you, it was, because once I went out there, I got away from all the crazy destructive behavior and was loving it out there. I was going fishing by the Chilliwack River that they had there. My biological dad was like, he won a steelhead contest, and we won like all you can eat fish from the restaurant there, which is kind of a joke in itself, because the thing about the steelhead that we were catching is that it was almost the size of my dad, so we had more than enough fish to last us a month. They kind of made that thing as kind of just like to get your picture taken as kind of like a local fame, because they don't really expect people to go in there to eat the fish and chips and stuff like that for a month. But and they actually were super cool about it. It was only my dad that was supposed to get the free fish and chips, but because I went with them and they knew that I was fishing with them, they gave us both free fish and chips, and we totally abused it. We just kept the steelhead meat in the freezer. So then after we had a month of fish and chips from this place, we practically lived on the freaking fish for like a week or two. Plus he had some salmon and pike and whatnot, and so it's kind of cool. I got to like get more in touch with nature and stuff, and I don't know, it was kind of cool. Like, we were actually, my dad was renting a cabin from a dude named Bruce, who's actually native, and it was on native land. So I think my dad was kind of smart that way, because renting a place on the reserve was kind of like awesome, because we were able to go out into like the top part of, because it actually like his property went up into like the side of Vetter Mountain, and I don't know if it was Vetter Mountain, but it was one of the mountains out there where it was kind of, it's not so much as the mountains, it's kind of like if anyone's ever been out Vancouver way, there's like when you're getting like, there's like kind of Vancouver, which is like coastal, so you get a lot of rain there, but after Vancouver, you've got like Langley. You've got different parts of Vancouver, and Langley is like super flat. And a lot of people, it's actually a really kind of grid pattern. It's very close to the border. In fact, it's actually got like a satellite or some sort of thing constantly there, because there's many times where when I was living in Langley later on, they'd have like these crazy manhunts for people that would like cross the border, and or like with backpacks and stuff with weed, obviously. And so they'd send like the RCMP and stuff like that. So it was kind of, that made it kind of interesting, you know. But it was kind of cool, because like Langley's really flat, and then once you get outside of like Langley, you got like another 20-30 minutes, and then you hit like Abbotsford, which is where you're starting to get a little bit of some hills there. There's obviously some like mountains when you're getting closer, like Whistler, stuff like that, and whatnot, but that's kind of more northern. We were kind of going more east, and kind of like lower to where the border is. And so after you get past Abbotsford, there's Chilliwack, and Chilliwack is kind of it's like just when you get like, there's some lowlands and there's some kind of like valley farmlands, and then it starts to kind of go up to like a hilly kind of like, they're like somewhat mountains. Like if you're in Ontario, you'd be like, look at those mountains. But then you go a little further, and then you actually hit the Rockies, and then it's a lot higher. So Chilliwack was a really cool place. It has like 3 different parts to it. It's kind of like Vancouver, because it's got like Sardis and Vetter, and that's all part of Chilliwack and stuff. And that was when my dad was kind of with that chick Jara or whatnot, but things didn't really work out with her. She was really crazy. Like, she had her brother come up or whatnot, and he was telling us like some stuff where they would like beat, like, you get beaten with like a burlap sack full of like potatoes and stuff like that for like not reciting the Lord's prayer properly, or some weird stuff like that, or thinking wicked thoughts and stuff like that, which anything is considered a wicked thought. Apparently, I guess that's not what they, yeah, I don't know, cults, man, it's weird. But yeah, and so then we ended up meeting, like, he was dating some other chick named Joy, and she was really cool, but that never really worked out from what I knew, because I was going to school, I was loving it. What sucked, though, was they kind of have a thing out there where it's like a middle school, 7, 8, 9, and so I think I was in, I think at this time I was like grade 9-ish or whatnot, and, or was it grade 8? I can't remember. It was either grade 8 or grade 9 or whatnot. I think it was grade 9, yeah. And so I was going to Vetter middle school, and I loved it out there. Like, that was back when they actually had really good, like, an amazing school program where I was doing like broadcast media. I was like making movies and stuff like that, and it was actually like a class where you could make movies, and I was like actually like learning it pretty well, and we were like taking parts from different movies, or like making like weird zombie movies and stuff like that, and just loving it, right? Like, we only had to do like certain shots, but we'd like make an entire like we would have like a whole class to do it. So instead of just doing like basic things, we would like do all these like crazy advanced like stories and stuff, and people just loved them. It was a lot of fun, and we had other people act in there too. It was like really corny, totally B grade, but it was fun. And I really enjoyed it out there, and met a couple, because like right where they had like where we were living in Chilliwack, if you just go up the road a little bit, it's a place called Cultus Lake, which is a beautiful place for swimming. It was amazing glacier, like water and stuff, but there was also some biker stuff going on up there too, like reserve and whatnot. Like, there were some people, I think they ended up doing a thing where they went out with like, once that like sonar stuff that they had for boats became a big thing, where they could like where it was like affordable to go out with like and like do all the like the, I don't know, maybe radio something or whatnot, or some cool thing, or scanning the ocean, like not the ocean floor but the lake floor, because it's like a really deep kind of lake in certain areas. They started finding these these cement barrels, and so they started bringing up these cement barrels, and they found out that there were bodies in them. So that was kind of interesting. I guess people would put like their victim who owed the money or whatnot. There's all kind of speculation whether or not it was Hell's Angels, or whether or not it was pissed off natives that you happened to get on their wrong side and stuff. And they would either put their victim alive. Some people said it was alive because I guess they found evidence of it. I don't know how they do it, because I'm not a criminal pathologist, or like, don't really know any of that stuff. But they were saying that they were putting their victims in these barrels, and they'd keep like a tiny hole in it, and they would fill it with quick drying cement, and like either nail it or seal it shut aside from a hole. And so when they dropped it into the water would start to get into the hole, and then it would like get heavy and then sink to the bottom, and that person would like pretty much die a really horrible way, or they would already be dead and never be found, pretty much. And so that's a wonderful little story about Cultus Lake. But aside from that little bit, it was actually a really cool place. And actually, my dad, we used to go up like hunting and stuff, and he kind of got me into firearms, and it was totally illegal. Like, a lot of stuff, the stuff he had like an SKS, like a bunch of like a .308 Winchester Magnum rifle, and a bunch of 22s and like 30-06s and stuff. And we would have like he had like a shit ton of ammo and stuff in his place, and at that time he was also growing weed. He was doing a lot of stuff on the side that kind of just hush hush. But the thing was, the police couldn't go on the land, and he would just drop off a 2-4 to the res cops every now and then. They were totally fine with him, renting from the property from well, it wasn't that he owned it. It's just it was like I think it was somebody else's property or whatnot that was his brother, but his brother was taking care of it, and then he died, and then my dad ended up knowing him and whatnot, and so he ended up renting the place to us. I'm not even sure if it was 100% legal, because from what I heard from like the Native Act or whatnot, there's like a lot of stuff you can't even really do on there. And so looking back, I was kind of wondering how much of that stuff was questionably legal. But you know, like I had a lot of fun, and there was a couple times where we'd like go out like hunting bear and stuff, or a couple times where we would go like hunting 22s for jackrabbits, but then I'd take like a 30-08 Winchester Magnum rifle, and like that thing had a kick, and a freaking like that thing was so damn loud, like just ridiculously loud. You could hear it. Like we had to go really high up there, and then after we shot it, we had to like make sure that we like maybe drove the truck about a good 2 kilometers somewhere else, just in case the res cops or whatnot came a looking. So I ended up like taking a rabbit out with a 308 Winchester Magnum rifle. It was funny because we were out there just getting we were eating the rabbits. Like the thing is, jackrabbits, you need a bunch of them to really make a stew. It's really all you can, and like a 22 usually does the trick. But I just got this really bad thought in my head, and my dad loved it because he just saw me going for the 22, and then I just kind of said, "You know what, Dad? Here," and I put the CD on, put it down. I said, "Can you pass me the Winchester?" And so he just looked at me. He's like, "No, you're not gonna do this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this." And so and the thing is, these rabbits, we're up in these like a Toyota truck in the back, and we had him driving it, and me in the back with at that time I think we had his, what was it, Joy's brother or Jared's brother, I can't remember. But sure enough, they passed me the bloody 308 Winchester rifle, and I put it right in the sights, right in the scope, and pulled the trigger, and the bunny rabbit was just non-existent. There was a crater of blood and fur, and I kind of feel bad now looking back at it, but from a psychotic point of view, it was gold, and I probably would do it again, to be honest with you. Okay, I'm sorry for all the animal rights, and I love animals. Like, I never was ever cruel to any of the pets or whatnot that I've ever had, but I don't know, it's just something about that time where that bunny rabbit had to die in the most gruesome way possible. So I'm probably gonna get someone that's gonna say something in the comments about that, but whatever. But yeah, I got used to firearms and stuff like that when I was out there. We didn't really have any pistols or any stuff like that, but yeah, so that was kind of interesting. But I ended up moving back. Well, actually, it wasn't so much a moving back. I went for Christmas because my stepdad and my mom were like, "Oh, Roy, we miss you or whatnot. How are you doing out there?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing fine," because I actually was really loving it out there. I love BC, and I loved living out in Chilliwack. And so I went back for the Christmas, and before I could go back, my stepdad tore up my return ticket and told my dad in BC that I wasn't going to be coming back. So that didn't really go over too well, and I was pretty pissed off for quite some time. And so they did this thing where, like, when I was coming back, my grandma, she ended up like buying me like a bunch of stuff to be like, "Oh, we're gonna pretty much re-kidnap him," And so they decided, "Oh, well, he's probably going to be pissed off about it, so let's get him some stuff for Christmas," which I totally, that was at the time where, like, I think it was around 96 or something. I don't know. No, not 96. It was more higher than that. But anyways, yeah, because I would have been 10 by then. No, this was back when I was, about 13, coming to 14, and I think this was around the time where, like, Nintendo 64 was kind of a thing. And so they bought me a Nintendo 64 with a couple of games like GoldenEye and Star Fox, and they also got me like a universal weight set and like a cool couch thing that would like fold it out into like a futon thing, and and the guitar. I think I don't know if I said that before or whatnot. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I was like, I was pretty pissed off. I'm not gonna lie, But I was like, oh, cool, this stuff here, I guess I better make the best of the situation, because it's not like I can really do anything. And so within like 3 months, my dad had my guitar pawned and then forgot to take it out. So I lost that after I was actually making a serious attempt to learn how to play guitar. And so I think ever since then, that kind of just really kind of screwed me up, because when I really wanted to learn how to play guitar, because at that time there was like kids in school that like were playing guitar and getting musical, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I was like trying to like learning like the 3 chords, basic kind of crap like that, right? But I think it kind of like wrecked me, because I don't know, it's just like there was like 2 other attempts where I've like tried to learn to play guitar, and I could only get to a certain part, and I just can't do it, which is a shame, because I have a really great singing voice. You might have heard a couple songs that I've written about 3 songs, but it's not like I ever really intend to make them do anything special or to go anywhere with them, you know, just like stuff like that. And I really like going to karaoke when I can, or just singing in general. Really, singing has always been kind of a thing where, see, my mom, she's a great singer. She could do Patsy Cline. In fact, there were certain times when I was younger, around that time too, where she was around like 13, 14, where she started doing like karaoke, and then she started doing like tribute shows for Patsy Cline, and it actually became a really big thing for her. She went to like Reno, where they had I think it was like some sort of Patsy Cline tribute thing, and she had like the Charlie Dick, I think is the name of the guy, who was actually Patsy Cline's husband, so he actually had all the estate after she died and whatnot. And I think she was one of the few people, like 1 or 2 people, that was actually officially recognized as a good Patsy Cline tribute artist or whatnot. And she won like some Clonies, and it was kind of like an awards thing that they have for, in like, I think it was either Vegas or someplace like that. Either Vegas or Reno, I'm not too sure. But you know, she deserved it, you know. And actually, when she was pregnant with me, she decided not to pursue a singing career when she was 16, because apparently there was a company that wanted to get her into singing, but she decided to have a kid and not really do that kind of stuff. So, you know, I definitely appreciate the sacrifice that she made for me, which was awesome, you know. And I'm really kind of glad that I got my singing voice from her. And also, my little brother is really good. He's got like a more of a softer, kind of more pop voice. But he got that from my mom too, and we were always kind of afraid that he'd get my stepdad's voice. Apparently, my stepdad was a really good singer up until he hit puberty, and then his voice cracked, and he couldn't really hit any good notes at all. In fact, it was more like when you would get drunk and try to sing, smoke gets into your eyes. It was more of a comedic thing than anything. But yeah, we still loved him, and so yeah, so that whole kind of thing, living there, and then we ended up moving from Niagara Falls to Guelph for a bit, and then subsidized housing there. And so that was after we already lived there before, but we were living in a different part of it. I was going to a different school, so I didn't even know the people from beforehand. I was going to Willow Road School, and Willow Road was kind of interesting because it was built on a swamp, and so it was like sinking in every few years. They had to like do some sort of like major rebuilding thing for it, so it was always like constant construction. And they had a guy named John Manick there, and I guess he did like a Santa Claus that was really famous, and it was actually on the Red Green show. And so he was kind of like famous in Guelph for that. So I had like an art class with him. He was a really cool teacher. I was like, you know, some of the teachers, like I moved around so many different times, and so you kind of, a lot of those teachers, because I had a bit of a record that followed me too as a bit of a problem child. Like I got better when I got to high school. It's just when you're younger, you know, if you're different, people, you know, ostracize you for it. But once you hit high school, if you're different, then you become the cool kid, which is just, I don't understand how that works. It was kind of the thing in the 90s and the kind of like millennium stuff like that, but I don't know what it's like now, because obviously kids are like not going outside during recess, so they're probably like playing Club Penguin or some stupid thing like that or something. I don't know what the latest thing is, you know, yeah, nowadays. So it was interesting, you know. It was kind of funny because after moving from Guelph, we ended up moving to Burlington, and in Burlington, that's kind of, I was living with my grandparents at the time because, well, I was kind of still getting into fights with my dad because they were him and my mom are fighting, and I was getting to that age where I was kind of becoming a teenager and kind of doing my own thing, and you know, smoking pot and stuff. So even though my dad did it, it was kind of like a thing where I didn't want to do around him or do with him, because he would whip my ass because I was still too young. And yeah, so at that time I was living with my grandparents for a bit, and then I ended up moving. I was going to like Lester B. Pearson in high school, and so I met a couple people there. It was kind of cool or not. It was kind of more like I would always kind of become friends with like outcasts and stuff. So I was like friends with I think my most notable friends in that school were a dude who really liked anime, lesbian chick who really liked anime, some a gay drama dude, like a kind of like super white and like insulated, a really nice kid named I think it's like Andrew, I think, or whatnot. Yeah, Andrew Stupart. This is a super nice dude, though. And his family were like really cool. He had a little brother that used to like pick on him, like like aggressively pick on him like an alpha little brother, and I couldn't help but just kind of like chuckle because he was like way too nice and he didn't know how to like deal with it. You get like way too pissed off, and I'd be like trying to laugh because I was like the oldest and I had like a little brother and sister, so I used to like wrestle around with my sister and stuff like that too. But like I would do it in a way where it wasn't like violent. Like we never actually had like serious fights. We'd have a thing where we'd like get a bunch of cushions and stuff like that, and like we'd like watch WW like F Raw back when it was like awesome, and like before it became like too much of a joke and UFC took over. And so I'd like pretend to like body slam her and stuff like that, but I wouldn't do it hardcore. I would like, you know, make sure that she landed on the pillow and not get hurt or whatnot. You know, sometimes we get carried away, and then it'd be like, mom, and then you know how it is, right, with kids. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that way. And so, but what happened was, we ended up living in Burlington for a bit, and we were living in the subsidized housing thing, obviously, because we did that a lot. And my mom was still doing with the kind of multiple sclerosis thing, but ended up going into remission, thankfully, and she's been all right now, but she does get a lot of pains and stuff like that. And so we were in, yeah, and that's when I started going to Central High School. And there was something about that just kind of really changed, because I met like a really kick-ass group of friends in high school, and I was like a freaking legend, because I used to do this thing called the Roy Bomb, where I would like hyperventilate and I would like scream really loud. Like I had this like amazing thing where I'd be like Roy, and I'd scream really loud and you could hear it throughout the whole school, and it became this thing like, do the Roy Bomb. And so like even sometimes when I go to Burlington to visit, there's like people like Roy Bomb, you know. It's ridiculous. It's one of those like, you know, you become a legend for the most goofiest things. I think there was one time too, I like did the Roy Bomb so many times that I actually like blanked out. Kind of had a thing there. Well, there was one time where I kind of in Niagara Falls beforehand, like I got the crap beaten out of me with my own baseball bat. So that was one of the reasons too I went out to BC, but I managed to like stay away from my folks, so they didn't really know about the extent of that kind of injuries, but I got hit in the head a couple times, and ever since then, when I was like around kind of like from like 13 to about like 18, 19, I used to get these weird just kind of like not seizures, but just kind of like blankouts sometimes. I think it was from that trauma. So yeah. So I think when I was doing the Roy Bomb too, it didn't help things. So I was like depriving my brain of oxygen. But at the same time, I was also, you know, we were doing like Students for Social Justice and stuff. But that was back in a time when like social justice didn't mean the social justice that we have nowadays, which is just batshit fucking crazy. We were doing protests to stop homeless shelters from being closed down, or to raise money for women's shelters and stuff like that. Like we actually did shit that was worthwhile and meaningful. And so obviously the whole 9/11 thing happened and stuff like that, and this was after, because I was in Guelph when that happened in 2001, and you know, that definitely kind of changed like the whole thing. But ever since, like I kind of like when I found out about it, and I was kind of like, oh okay, and heard about like on the news and stuff, and then it became this huge thing, going to war and all that jazz. But I was completely against. I became kind of more political and aware of stuff when I was in Burlington. I think this was around 2003. Because then they had like the war in Iraq, and we were very political. We were against Bush, and I started doing I was wearing shirts with political slogans, and at that time I was very pretty much my buddy Mel, Aravana Edwards, really good friend from high school. We kind of I don't know. It was kind of like he's from Chile, right? And originally from Chile. And his dad was grew up during the whole Augustus Pinochet thing, and he met his mom and stuff, and they're super nice people, and they came to Canada and they made a life for themselves and whatnot, but they were kind of Marxist, socialist, kind of communist, and so that's kind of where I got my, I started realizing, instead of just getting drunk and having good times down at Central Park and whatnot, or at the music center where there were different bands and people from high school, and I was kind of like a legend back in those days. It was kind of cool because I got into reading some of the books, like one of Noam Chomsky's The Washington Connection and Third World Fascism was a really great book. It kind of opened my eyes to how the CIA and FBI was, kind of doing the whole war against communism by proxy wars and assassinations and installing puppet dictators and stuff. And so that kind of got me anti-American, kind of anti-state. I was looking into anarchism, communism, stuff like that. It was very more radical back in those days. But I think a lot of people were when they were really young, because they just kind of see the injustice of the world. And it's at that time I also had a lot of stuff going on with my dad. We were at the point where I was even trying to work legitimate jobs, because at that time I was 15, and I was working night shifts at Tim Hortons, and I'd come home and my dad would get into a fight there was a couple times where we actually got into full-blown fist fights, and it got to the point where I had to get out of there, and so I ended up staying in a group home for a bit. Actually, no, that was when I was staying in a group home, and it was kind of cool because I was working a couple jobs and still going to school, even though at that time I really didn't take school seriously at all. I just went to school high since that was the only high school really experience. There's a lot of cool people there, and they were doing their things, and obviously they were planning on going off and doing their stuff in life, but I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I had a lot of issues just with my stepdad. But there was times where I'd be sleeping out underneath the bridge or whatnot, underneath where they had Sobeys and stuff like that there. And but it was kind of cool because once I was working, there was a couple of people who I worked the night shift with that they were actually kind of it was Nick and Greg Pristy, wonderful people. And we used to I was working the night shift at Tim Hortons, and even though I wasn't really taking it seriously, because the thing was I was working I told her that I didn't mind working part-time and stuff, but I wouldn't mind having some weekends off every now and then. But then this chick named Sama, we used to call her Osama. She was it's a horrible and racist thing, but she was a total cunt in my defense. But it got to the point where I was doing stupid things to keep myself I was doing robot voices for people that would come in welcome to Tim Hortons, can I take your order? It was back when freaking Clone High was a thing, so I was doing the bot that can only do two tones. And then a couple times I would take one of the extra large coffee cup boxes and I'd turn it into I'd cut a little ice slot out there and have some arms. I'd be a coffee serving robot doing the voice on the drive-thru thing, and most people loved it. There was the odd asshole who was really pissed off, or I'm gonna complain, blah blah blah. I'm does not compute. It was ridiculous. I'm service error. It was ridiculous. Oh, those were the days. And that was also when I kind of had my first high school real true love. One of those kind of things, how they say the first love is always the hardest love. And Her name was Steph. She was a really cool chick. She was like a French kind of punk rocker. Had like listened to like emo stuff too and whatnot. But she was really cool, and it was kind of awesome. Her brother Nick was like a pretty cool guy too. So I got to like know like the French culture and stuff. Like we went to Montreal and I got to see like that city, like the Fun Fouf Electrique, for anybody that knows Montreal. It's like a pretty cool club where they used to have like grunge bands and stuff. Like Nirvana got all messed up on, Kurt Cobain got all messed up on heroin apparently, and wrote a bunch of cool shit in the back part there and on the walls, and it was kind of interesting. So it was, but I was with her for 3.5 years, and it got to the point where, it was like it was great times. It was like probably like those times in high school where I was just like on top of my game and had the world to go, and like did a lot of drugs, but also had a lot of fun. And I never screwed really anybody over or anything like that. I used to go down to the Central Park area and get hammered. That was like the thing to do, because they had like this one stretch of like trees where people would go get smashed, and then they'd have like way over on one distance was a parking lot, and way over on the other distance was another parking lot. So if the cops ever came, we always had a way to get out of there before they got to the table. But there was a couple times where we kind of overdid it, like when we had a Roman candle fight in the park that kind of drew some attention. Another time where like there was like a concert going on there, and we had like the Oakville Tactical Cops. We were climbing up a tree listening to stuff, and they like took us down, or were like, get out of the tree or whatnot, and we were like joking around with them, but they didn't like take that shit as a joke. They were pretty serious. Ended up like having my head like smashed on the freaking table with my nose pissing out blood because it was a hemophiliac, and like I was like literally choking on my own blood because they had like my face right into it, because they're like, I was a big guy, and at that time I was pretty like heavy set too and strong, so they weren't taking no chances, and it didn't really turn out to anything. They actually kind of overdid it, and so the Burlington police were like, yeah, you guys kind of overdid that. They're like local kids and they don't really cause anyone trouble, but we kind of did. but we didn't really they didn't know about it, so that was good. And there's a few things I'm not going to put on the public record here that we did that caused a fair amount of property damage. Oh my god! But those were just the days, it was ridiculous. We got into a lot of shenanigans, and I had a like from the relationship side of things with Steph. Things were really awesome. We had our ups and downs, like how it is with pretty much every relationship. But I think what really kind of it was like 3.5 years into it was like after high school. It was like I got expelled because I mooned the vice principal. I was not taking high school seriously whatsoever. I was falling behind and whatnot, and ended up I was working like 3 jobs. I was still with Steph, and working going to like adult ed at like it was like Brock High School or something. That was one of the schools where they ended up closing down. It was mostly an adult education thing for a small period of time, and I managed to do most of my like main courses, but I was missing electives, and they didn't have any way of me doing electives aside from going to Hamilton. And at that point I was just like, screw it, I'm like paying rent. I was like having parties at my place because I was renting with Greg and Nick, and it was like awesome because I had like money for beer all the time, and we would like do stupid stuff, like we'd save our empties, and then they decided to like make a picture of me, and I was like all like pretending to be all sprawled out, passed out on the floor, and there was like 300 beer bottles all around me, and they're like, don't move, and I had to sit there for like an hour not moving. It was like I actually almost fell asleep a couple times, and I wasn't drunk or anything. It was pretty funny. And I would drink like a 2-4 of Bohemian, or like a 2-4 in just like a night. Like I don't know what it was. I was like a freaking tank before I was like even before I was like 18, 19ish. And so the thing is, it's it was like the high school glory days, and I was loving it because for most people, like the high school thing is a transition, right? Most people think high school is just kind of like odd and really kind of like awkward and like completely torturous. But I actually hit my stride. It was like, I think it was lucky because I happened to go to a school that was like Central High School, but it was badass. I hear they're trying to close it now in Central, in Burlington now. Was like a really kind of hippie kind of, like, they had the jock side of the school who like to play sports and football and stuff, but they also had a very drama kind of like musical arts, and like people would like play, like they had like a guy who was Varga or something, or some rock band that like they did pretty good with. He was like, I can't even remember the teacher's name, but he was an awesome dude, which just goes to show you all the many teachers I've had and stuff. And it was a cool vibe. It was a good place, but you know, it was also kind of one of those things where I realized that all my friends were pretty much going to be going on to do things, you know, like I ended up moving in with my girlfriend at the time and her brother, because her parents ended up going back to Montreal, and so they were in a townhouse, Surrey Lane, I think, yeah. And so it just worked out perfectly where we took over renting it, and we were living there for a bit. And so yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had parties and stuff like that, but even though we were kind of enjoying life, it got to the point where, you know, my friend Mel, he was obviously like, he came from a family that, you know, it was like a first generation immigrant kind of family, so like they worked their ass off. Well, his mom was a Canadian, she had Canadian citizenship and whatnot, but his dad worked his ass off as a welder and stuff, and he also had his brother, and what they did was like they wanted him to go on to university and stuff, which is like understandable, you know. I mean, I think he was doing like political sciences. He went to Windsor and whatnot, so I didn't really see him that much. And so when he did kind of come up, it was like we'd hang out and stuff like that. But it was like, you know how life is, right? It's like people go on and do things, and I was kind of just finally at a part in my life where I was like just happy to have a good group of friends and stuff. But you know, it just so happened that, you know, people started drifting apart kind of thing. And also my ex-girlfriend, well, girlfriend at the time, I mean, Steph, she was kind of, she got a job at a call center in Hamilton, so she was kind of commuting to Hamilton, and I think a lot of it had to do with, like, the fact that she was kind of looking to, like, a career kind of thing and, like, settling down, and there's me kind of being a wild guy, you know, having parties and stuff, and, like, a legend in my own right at that time, and I didn't really think about the future. In fact, like, marriage, stuff like that was just like, I was just like, no, that's not happening right now, you know. Like, not that I would like dick around on her or whatnot. There's a couple times where I had a couple opportunities, and like, you know, if I was left to my own devices, I might have faltered, but I stayed completely loyal to her the whole time. It was kind of like a couple times where there was like, I don't know, a couple chicks where, and the thing is, all my friends, like, they all like, I don't mean to like talk bad about them or whatnot, because they're like awesome people, and you know, there's a couple of them that are still together now, but like, you know, they kind of did their own thing and had like some, you know, screw ups in relationships and stuff like that, but like, man, they lasted a lot, like they were still together, and I'm like, damn it. And like, I was like completely, you know, like loyal, and my relationship didn't work out because it was kind of a thing where she was kind of dealing with an insurance, like, she was, because she could speak French and English, like, she was really good at what she did. But the thing was, she was working in a call office for Cunningham Lindsay, and in the BBC building downtown Hamilton, and they had this thing where she would take calls on a regular basis from like horrible accidents of like what happened, and it was usually call centers in Canada, and they were dealing with clients from the States, like the whole, I think it was like 2003 where they had that crazy hurricane season for like 2003 2004, I'm not too, I think it was around then, like where they had she was telling me about like some of like, just like, she'd come home with like the most like nastiest stories about people that died in real life, you know. And I think that kind of gets to you after a while when you work in that kind of office environment, and you know, it's because she would like tell me like times where there was like a mother who was like bawling on the phone, and she was like almost near suicidal because she told her son he lit up a smoke. During a hurricane, they had everything barricaded down. Like, they had all the windows and stuff all boarded. And so I guess the son was having a smoke. And so he decided to smoke up in the house. And the mother was like, no, I'm not, I can't stand the smell of cigarettes. Go out to the garage if you're going to smoke. And so he went out to the garage and had a smoke during a hurricane. And then had the bright idea, oh, what happens if I raise the garage door? So he put the garage door up, and he's having a smoke, and I guess he was watching stuff go by, and then he was like, I guess he thought it was funny to go out and kind of a few steps out to try to see if he could, you know, ride the wind or whatnot, and a piece of shrapnel from roof came out and decapitated the poor bastard. And the mother was just the point where she wanted to kill herself. And when she told me that, I could tell those were the days where, you know, she really did not like being in that job. Like, she hated it, because like I could definitely tell how it was like affecting her psyche just mentally and stuff. And she was also kind of thinking, what am I doing here, you know, like, am I going to be doing a call center, or, you know, stuff like that. So she kind of like, I guess there was like a dude who was working at the office who was like, you know, acting like he had all of his shit together and stuff. And so we kind of like, she ended up moving out of the place we were at, and whatnot. There was some issues there and stuff, but I would still go visit her in Hamilton. But like at the time too, I was kind of like, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life either. I was just like trying to figure stuff out, really, you know. It was kind of, but I did really care about her, and I mean, she was my first love, and I really did love her. I mean, you know, my friends did kind of, you know, be like, oh, well, she's acting like, you know, be a bitch or whatnot, and like, you know, cold-hearted and stuff like that. But I know she was a really cool person inside and whatnot. And yes, the sad thing is, I still think about her, you know, and I know it's, you know, probably never gonna give me ever the time of thought. Probably, you know, maybe like once every couple of years, maybe she might think, but you know, it's just how it is. And you know, it's just life. You know, it's things. The Great White Buffalo, as they say at the Hot Tub Time Machine. But you know, so she ended up like going with that guy, and then she's like with him for a bit, and then just telling me about it, and I'm like, did not want to hear that shit. I started going fucking pissed off, because that was at the point where like the Valentine's Day, I actually kind of like, I took some time to think, and I'm like, you know what, I don't want to lose her as a girlfriend, and I really cared about her, and I actually was really looking to get like to look into ways to straighten my life out and stuff like that. And so I like was like, all right, I'm gonna, you know, not be such a crazy party animal. And so yeah, I got like the phone call, and she was kind of like ready to move on, and I didn't take it too well. In fact, like, I was doing all kinds of self-destructive stuff at that point. It was not healthy for me whatsoever. I think it was the one time where she told me that she, like, after 3 months of dating this guy, he like fucking got her knocked up and shit, and then she found out that he was like banging other chicks and stuff in the office too. So I was kind of like, I don't know, kind of mad, and also kind of like laughing and on the inside. But I don't know, I was kind of, it wasn't right, and I kind of hated myself for it. And that kind of really got to the point where I was really suicidal. And yeah, I did a lot of stupid stuff. I like put a fucking knife into the, like, I was doing drugs like crazy. I was coke, fucking ecstasy, meth, you know, shit like that. It wasn't good for me at all. I knew it. And smoking a shit ton of weed, and practically most of my paycheck was going towards beer, weed, or whatever extra drugs I had. And I was working like 3 different jobs, or 2 different jobs, I think. And you know, I wasn't really caring about education or stuff like that at that point. I was just like, fuck it, didn't care. And I was living with my buddies, but they could definitely tell I was kind of messed up, because I was doing stuff like branding myself with like a fucking coat hanger wire that we made into like a peace sign that I had to have, apparently. And then my buddy ended up making like a 1/4 inch like peace sign brand that we were going to brand me with, but I ended up going out to BC again. But anyways, I was like drinking bleach, and that didn't work too well. I drank like half a cup of bleach and was like, I threw up, was really dizzy, and like I could barely talk. It like fucking killed some brain cells in there. And like my buddy Will came in, like he ended up rooming, because after the townhouse didn't work out, I ended up getting an apartment with my buddy Mike and his girlfriend and Will. And what happened was like I'm still really good friends with well, not so much as Will. I don't see him as much now because he's got like his own life. He knew what he wanted to do. He was like doing carpentry around that time. He was doing his apprenticeship and stuff like that. Like he knew what he wanted to do, and he came from a real stable kind of household or whatnot, and good family. So I always had a lot of respect for him. You know, I always have a lot of respect for people that go into trades and stuff like that, or knew what they wanted to do in life. You know, I was never one of those people that, like, if I didn't know what I wanted to do, had to drag people down. I mean, there were certain parts where, when it comes to drugs and stuff like that, yeah, you kind of end up unwillingly doing that. But you know, it's I never had any kind of like really manipulation or will like that, but it was more very self-destructive. Like, I wanted to take myself out, and if I would have stayed there, I probably would have, and succeeded, because I was doing stupid stuff. Like I did a roof dive off of a 2-story high school onto a table that I had wrapped in barbed wire, and then I set on fire with gasoline. Stupid stuff like that. You know, I thought it was fun. People thought it was badass and crazy, but it got to the point where it was really kind of soul destroying. It wasn't helping my mental, you know, because I was a complete atheist. I didn't believe in anything. You know, I thought I was open to, like, you know, the other side and like ghosts and stuff like that. That idea I always thought was pretty cool and whatnot, but I didn't really want to mess around with that stuff too much. But I was kind of flirting with death. There's no way around it. And so after everything, then I was all single and like really depressed and stuff. I decided, you know, like I ended up talking to getting a hold of my biological dad, and at this time he was out in Langley, and he had like some stuff going. At least he was telling me that he had some construction stuff going, that he was looking that I could go out there and work and whatnot, and that we could like settle down and make a life out there. And so I was like, you know what? I talked to my friends, and they knew. I think this was like 2007-ish, yeah, 2007, and I was like, you know, guys, I really want to stay here, but, you know, I mean, if I stay here any longer, I'm probably not gonna live that much longer. Or I also had a joke with my friends that I probably wouldn't make it past 27. I honestly, seriously, never thought I would make it past 27. I shit you not. Not so much as the fact that I was a big guy, it's because I did a lot of crazy shit. Like, I got like a fucking skull fucking cane, and I ended up smashing it on my fucking skull, and like on the like I was doing all kinds of stupid stuff, man. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, very stuff that you do at parties kind of thing, that's like, holy shit, what's that guy doing? You know, like I think at one point, at one party, I was like drinking nail polish remover because I had like a sore throat trying to sing, and it did not work out too well. It kind of made me look like a fool, but everyone thought it was funny anyways. And then I was like, to outdo someone that was doing crazy shit, like they broke like a bottle over their head, so I took like a piece of that bottle and I just bit into it and started chewing fucking glass. And I think I actually swallowed some glass. I don't know, it didn't work out too well there. I was definitely feeling it the next couple days. That's for sure. I'm lucky I didn't do anything that like would have caused severe damage to me for long term. So yeah, anyways, it was one of those things where I needed to go out and kind of, you know, because my biological dad was like, oh, come on out here. And at that time, my stepdad and my mom and my brother and sister were living in Woodstock, which is where I'm currently located now. And the thing about my brother and sister is that they actually stayed in Woodstock for quite some time. You see, I ended up going out west and doing a whole bunch of backpacking and stuff like that, but they still stayed in Woodstock, so they got to actually like have that kind of experience where they knew everyone and, you know, grew up with certain kids and stuff like that. And what happened was I ended up going out to BC, and at first I was living in Langley with my biological dad and a biker, not a biker chick, but well, she was like a truck driver. She was kind of a bigger woman, kind of like older, in her 50s, kind of like, my dad would go after people who were lonely and were kind of really easily emotionally like, where you can manipulate them, like they were very gullible. Like my dad, he had like 3 chicks on the go at that time, aside from her, and like on all kinds of drugs, like really into the crack cocaine. I didn't know about this. Like, I went out there thinking, sweet, he's cleaned up, we're gonna be able to get some construction jobs, maybe live in Langley or Vancouver or whatnot, or, you know. And so for about 2-3 months we were living there at her place, and she had a son who was really kind of like, because Langley's like a very kind of flat area, but it's like a lot of horse riding enthusiasts, farmer, stuff like that. And so this guy, he was very country western oriented, and I respected him. I was more of rock and roll, old school kind of stuff, some new kind of music and whatnot, you know. I think White Stripes were kind of the big thing at that time. And you know, we didn't really have much in common, except he liked some Dragon Quest game that he got me into, but I was playing RuneScape, and I'm like, hey dude, well, I used to play RuneScape, and like I got him into that game. And because like, okay, like there was like a computer there, and like even he wasn't even really staying like at that place, like he'd come over to visit. And so because we started playing on the computer a lot, like she never even used the computer, and it was just because we were like bonding that she had a problem with. It was weird. And so she's like telling us we couldn't play RuneScape, and I'm like getting him into the game, and like I was having no problem like sharing the computer with him and stuff like that. Or if she wanted to go on and being like, oh yeah, no worries, you know, do something later. I was actually gonna like save up for a laptop and stuff at that time, because I was doing some construction work. We managed to get some gigs, but then I found out that my dad was kind of into some other stuff there too. He was dealing with some highly illegal things. In fact, he was really messed up. He stole like a 2007 BMW bike, and I guess he had it over at her place in this like storage thing. And he convinced her that somebody owed him money, or he bought it legally or something like that. And so she believed him because she was really gullible. And like my dad would be like, all right, son, I might be back, I might not be back. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And so he'd go out on his bike, on this BMW bike, and he would go on he would go so fast that the Langley police would chase after him. And because he loved the fact that it was such a grid pattern, it was easy for him to get away if he went like ridiculously high speed on the bike. He would like, the time that I was there for that 3 months, he went on 3 high-speed chases because I could hear the frickin' police sirens going back and forth. And the funny thing is, the police station was only 10 blocks away from where the house was. So the crazy motherfucker, man, like he could have easily been like run over by the police, and he did not care. He needed that high. He was a total adrenaline junkie, and I found out a little bit later that he was really far gone. He'd done a lot of fucked up shit. But I don't want to get him in trouble or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know if he's still alive. I haven't talked to him in years. But what happens anyways is he was like running out of money, and he was like, okay, well, he knew somebody in Calgary. And the thing is, he was a really good painter. Like, he had a lot of talents, like different trades that he learned from, because he had a big family. He had like, I think 18 brothers and sisters or whatnot from Newfoundland. And yeah, that was kind of interesting. So he learned like a bunch of different skills and stuff from him, and actually learned the proper way of doing things. Like, he could frame, he could, you know, do he could fix cars. He did a lot of stuff that was just kind of basic general wisdom that, you know, not a lot of people really know or have to go to school for now in trade schools, and not a huge demand for that. So he kind of was teaching me some of the painting and stuff. So we decided to go out to Calgary. And so he ended up borrowing some money from the Sioux lady or whatnot, and we ended up making a run for Calgary in this like old 80 something Dodge or whatnot. And so we managed to get all the way out to I think just outside of Kelowna, and we ended up popping a tire. And so we were kind of screwed because we had like absolutely no money. We were like living off of like fucking kimchi, like, oh my god, it was ridiculous, like ramen noodles and stuff. And sure enough, he managed to go up to Dilworth Homes in Kelowna, where they had like the rich area. He went on site, like, this is after we just got like we spent like some extra money to get an extra tire, and we're like, oh crap, we're screwed. And sure enough, he managed to go into like a site where they had this British guy, and he managed to completely, he gave him his resume and told him that he was a good painter, and told him that I could do like sanding and stuff. And sure enough, we got the job. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And so they have I think they had like I can't even remember the name of the center that they had there. It was like an aquatic center where we would go and have a shower and whatnot. And like I would have a shower, go swimming kind of thing after work, and then we go get some food and all that jazz. But it was pretty funny because we were like, there was like a bit of an issue with the British guy. He was kind of a jackass, and my dad was kind of blaming a lot of the problems that he was having on me. He was like saying, oh, I kept him like up at night or whatnot and stuff like that. But the truth was, he was like taking a shit ton of Percocets and not sleeping and working like 16-hour days and stuff. And so the guy was like, oh wow, you're doing a really good job. You're you know, I'd be like tired. I'd be like, oh my god, the sanding is killing my freaking arms. Like it was like probably one of the most in shape times of my life. But he was just going strong, 16 hours, just painting. Maybe get like one run on a door or whatnot, and the British guy would get all pissed off at him, and then he'd like try to like not to freak out. But then he ended up like banging one of the dude's like employee chicks who was painting, but she was like, I think like 18. And the guy thought it was just ridiculous. Like, he might have gotten into so much trouble. And then he was also kind of doing some pretty bad shit with like smoking crack and stuff. And I kind of told him, listen man, I'm not into that, you know. I'm more of a weed person. I don't really do the heavy drugs anymore. That's kind of the reason why I got out of Ontario, and I really loved it out in BC. Kelowna was a beautiful place. Like, I would on weekends, we'd have a spot where we would where we were supposed to meet up, and a couple of those times he was not there, or like, you know, 3 hours late. But I would go down to like the downtown area in Kelowna. Like, I saw Bedouin Sound Clash play there during Wakefest. That was really cool. One of my, like, I really got to like the Jay Malinowski, the singer and the band and stuff. I love their style. So it was one of the newer kind of Canadian bands I had a lot of appreciation for. And yeah, it was such a great time. I met a lot of cool people there and stuff. But I guess my dad was getting into the wrong kind of crowd. He was doing some crazy questionable stuff, and he pissed off I guess he pissed off some drug dealers or whatnot. And he ended up, as I was like, I got my wallet and stuff broken into from the wallet locker thing that they had at this place I was going to, and I had like absolutely nothing to my name, no identification or whatsoever. And the night afterwards, I knew where they were hanging out because they had this like weird thing where they kind of like put a porta potty up to where there's like this homeless thing where there are all these crackheads that was close to where the place where we used to go, or I would go and swim and stuff and take showers. Oh, sorry. So the night afterwards, I kind of suspected them because I saw the guy kind of like eyeing when I came out, and like kind of walking away really fast, so I knew something was up. And then once I found out that my locker had I guess they broke into like the locker that I had inside the change room before I went into the pool, and then they found like the key lock to it for the wallet locker, and so they tried a bunch of different combinations. And the people that ran the place said that they didn't, like, they had cameras, but they said they couldn't like get the camera thing because the lady was new or something. I was just really pissed off because I thought that was kind of bullshit. And so I kind of suspected who it was. There was like two native guys, and they had like three other really kind of, either one looked like kind of like mixed, maybe Latino, and a couple other really sketchy crackhead looking white guys. And so at about the next day, I ended up getting about a $200 advance from my work because I told them what happened, and I had absolutely no identification or anything like that. I had to end up getting it all over again, but I didn't do it there in Kelowna. The next night after I got my wallet and all my stuff pretty much robbed, I knew where they were. I kind of got a couple of these Okanagan ciders into me. They're like it's like, you know, I say cider and people are like, oh, pussy, but it's like Okanagan brand of cider from the BC. It's like they make it from like the Okanagan fruits, and it tastes so amazing. It was like really good, like this peach Okanagan cider that was like, man, it like was just liquid gold going down. I don't know what it is about the fruits and the cherries out in the Osoyoos and the Kelowna Okanagan region, and it's just some of the best fruit that you could possibly have, because I think they get like 8 months of the year where when it's a good season or a good year, they get a lot of sunlight, so everything ripens to the fullest, and it tasted so amazing out there. And so what happened was I ended up, the night afterwards, I saw them all kind of like cracked out and stuff, and I'm thinking, yeah, they're probably smoking the fucking drugs that they bought with my money. And I was pretty hammered, and I just fucking lost it. And I ran into where the camp was, where there was about 6 of them. And I knew I'd be outnumbered, but I was fucking pissed off. And so I grabbed their bike. There was a bike right from when you came in there. I picked up the bike, whipped it at the one guy who I knew was the one that was all like being sketchy and whatnot, hit him right in the fucking face, and then I started fighting all fucking 6 of them, man. I fucking lost it. I was screaming at him. I was giving elbows and fucking, like, they were crackheads. So at first they tried to fight me, but then they realized how fucking pissed off I was. They saw me throw a bike so the back wheel hit the fucking guy with the glasses right in the fucking face, and it was like a sketchy kind of like, he looked almost like one of those like native dudes with like a hacker kind of thing with like bad eyesight, I guess. I don't know what it was, but I kind of went for him first because he was the one who I kind of suspected, and he was kind of close to where the entrance was. So I ended up getting into a fight with like 6 of them, and 2 of them ran off because they saw how pissed off I was, and I kind of caught them while they were all cracked out or whatnot, I guess. And so I beat the shit out of them, and they ran the fuck away from me. One tried to stab me. I grabbed the knife and fucking hit him in the fucking face, and he dropped it. I elbowed him when I took the knife and boom, right into the fucking face. He was down. And then his buddy got him up, and they fucking ran off. And so I was so pissed off. They had a bunch of like clothes and stuff like that they kept in like this kind of hidden creek area right next to where they had the porta potty. And so I fucking got pissed off. I said, the trash belongs with the fucking trash. And I started throwing all the shit that they had there. They had some clothes. They had like kind of like a little kind of a couple sleeping bags and like a little setup there where, see, like the Kelowna police knew that there was crackheads in this little area there. It was pretty grown in, so they managed to have a little area to themselves right next to a stream. It was still in like pretty main urban spot, like kind of like a main city bit there, but it was like a kind of an area where the police knew that they would just kind of keep to themselves. But because they left the area and they left their stuff there, there was none of my money or anything. I couldn't find anything of value that I could sell. They managed to take the bike after I like whipped it at the dude's face, and so I just took all their shit and started throwing it all over the fucking place. And so then I left, and I managed to find where my dad was or whatnot and told him about it, and I felt pretty damn good about myself because I got my vengeance in one way or another, because I knew I wasn't ever going to get my money back. And so the next day, I guess because of the mess that I had left, they didn't go back because they thought I'd be like around there, because they knew I was going swimming and like showering maybe about half a kilometer away from there was the place where they had the where like this, I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was, but it was like a aquatic center kind of thing. And so I guess because I made such a mess, the next day there was like a bunch of business owners that saw a bunch of their crap all, like I threw it all over the place. Like some of it was actually close, like where you could see it like close to where the road was, and I guess they decided to call in the city, and then the city went in and completely like just cut out all, like they went in with weed whackers and stuff. I guess they thought that the sketch bags had like flailed or whatnot, all their stuff, and so they ended up losing this spot, which was like their main spot. And so that was I thought it was hilarious, but sure enough they were pretty much out to get me at that point. And at that time my dad got to the point where he had people that were out to kill him because he screwed some fucking guy that screwed him over or whatnot, or beat the shit out of, I don't know, he did some crazy shit that he wouldn't really tell me. And one night, this is like 2 nights after all the crap happened with the crackheads losing their spot, and so I go take a swim and whatnot, and then I'm waiting for him to come back, and he didn't come back. He took off and like fucked off past Kelowna, and I had stuff in like storage and stuff that I actually had like very precious stuff that I considered like valuable, and yeah, he like completely fucked off and ditched me. And I was like stuck sleeping outside in a place where I had people that were like looking for me to kick my ass or to like stab me or some shit, from I heard it from a couple people. And because there was one guy who was like, he came up and he was like, what the fuck you doing here? And I said, man, I was pissed off, and I didn't tell him that I was in a bad situation. I was just told him I'm waiting for the fuckers to come back, because I had to make something up. I couldn't say, oh, my dad left me here, because it would make me look like a fucking target, and you know. And so the guy, I ended up talking to him, because I was, you know, I'm a pretty good guy when I'm in a good mood, and like, you know, I knew he was one of the group, but he wasn't the guy who I suspected ripped me off. So I told him, yeah, and he was like, oh, what happened? Oh, I lost, my buddies lost their spot or whatnot because of you. And I said, yeah, well, they fucking ripped me off a couple days, you know, like the day before. So I'm like, they fucking deserved everything they got. And I said, you know, like, if you got a fucking problem with it, and then I'll fucking kick your ass right fucking here and now. And you know, he was kind of like, oh, I see where you're coming from. And he said, yeah, they did rip you off, man. They like, he completely admitted it to me. So I was totally fine with him. But the next day, I ended up at this point, the job never worked out with this British guy at the Dilworth Homes thing, because he was kind of a bit of an asshole and whatnot. And there was a couple times where I kind of screwed up. When I was trying to take the paint sprayer out, I like hit the button, and it like shot up a bunch of like watered down paint on the part of the ceiling inside of a fucking garage. So that wasn't too good. That was about a good hour work of having to fix that. But then he was like, at the end of the day, he was like, oh, JR, you're costing me too much money. And so I was like, oh, fuck. And so I was walking down the road, and then there was this German dude, and he did like stucco. And he was like, oh, are you not working, you know, with your dad? And I said, no, I just got fired. And he's like, oh, why is that? And I'm like, I don't know, I kind of hit the paint sprayer, and I explained it to him, and he was like, he says, that was an accident. And he said, why don't you come work for me? And I'm like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I don't like the British guy, he's too much of a pussy. And I fucking had so much love for the fucking German people at that moment. I was like, yeah, dude, thank you, because I'm fucked otherwise, you know. And so it worked out good that my dad was still working at the paint thing, and he just dropped me off, and I'd do the stucco. And for the stucco, it was a really awesome job. All it was doing was like cutting out plastic and stuff like that, and just taping down certain areas so that the stucco wouldn't get onto like balconies, windows, stuff like that. It was really easy peasy once I got the hang of it, and I loved that job. And the view where we were on top of the Dilworth Homes was just amazing. I could see why people like paid millions of dollars to be on top of that area there. And this is just after the fire. We were actually in the one part of the Dilworth Homes area where I can't remember exactly where it was. There was a bunch of different rabbits. Like there was a huge overpopulation problem with rabbits at the time. In fact, we were joking around about hunting them. But the thing is, in Kelowna, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't like technically hunt the rabbits. They just let the rabbits like overgrow because of this stupid BC wildlife and the urban liberal hippies that are like, don't cull the rabbits, man. So they end up like eating everything, destroying gardens and stuff. They became a real nuisance. If you talk to anybody in Kelowna about the overpopulation of the rabbits, they'll know exactly what you mean, because like the roads were just filled with bunny carcasses. Like, oh my god, it was funny. But yeah. So anyways, I managed to get. I was actually like working for about 2 weeks with the German guys, and it was going to be like the third week where I was going to get paid. But I told him my situation, and they gave me my pay there, and he said, hey man, that sucks what happened. And so I didn't really have like I think I had $100. It was a week after working with him, I managed to get some money out of him when he paid me there. So I still managed to get about like $400, and then I ended up getting a ticket out to actually I think it was my parents that from Ontario, because I told them about it, and I'm like, guys, my dad, like my biological dad, ended up ditching me with absolutely nothing and screwed me over. And so I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do now. And I also told them about the fact that I have people that if I stay here where I am right now, I might actually be in physical, harm. I'm, they're, I kind of pissed off the really sketchy low-life crackheads that would probably, stab their own fucking mother for, another crack hoot, pretty much. And so, I ended up getting a bus ticket from Kelowna to Nelson. And I'm thinking, okay, where was this Nelson place or whatnot? So first night I get there from the bus, I sleep on one of the park benches downtown. And apparently I was supposed to, because when we went out originally, years before, when we went out in the beat up old car from my grandpa Bob's vehicle, they actually got married out in Nelson, my mom and my stepdad. And because he knew a friend of his that we stayed at for about 2 weeks just outside of Samo, named Mike Atkins. And he was a nice guy or whatnot. He was kind of like way too kind of like self-righteous religious for my liking. But they had like a sawmill thing out there, so they were going to try to get me a job there. And so when I met him or whatnot, he was like, oh no, I kind of don't want you out there kind of thing. Gave me some bullshit excuses. I was ready to work. I was in peak physical condition. I was, after sanding freaking, $1 million homes and stuff like that, my arms were built like a brick shit house. I was a lot more in shape than what I am now. And so he gave me some kind of bullshit excuse. He's like, oh, there's like a place here or whatnot that'll take you in for like a month called the Stepping Stones or whatnot. And so I was like, oh, okay. And I guess I'm not getting any help here. So I stayed at the Stepping Stone place. And then I ended up, there was a place called Cottonwood Falls. Anyone who goes out west to the Kootenay area, I highly recommend Nelson. It is a beautiful place, but it's also kind of a small city town. Like I call it, it's a city kind of population-wise, because like it's like just a conglomeration of people on a hill, pretty much. And like there's people that live out in the valley and stuff that kind of come in for commuting and stuff, and they do their thing. But it was interesting out there, because I kind of like, when I was in the Stepping Stones, I was with like a really bad crackhead dude who ripped people off all the time. There was a dude named Chad who was like fucking crazy. He looked like he probably wasn't all fucking there to begin with, but he was like, you could tell he got in a lot of fights and shit like that. He was one of those people you gotta watch out for. You say the wrong thing, right? And there's a couple other people too. And, they were kind of tough and shit like that. So I had enough worldly knowledge to kind of play the clown, but also kind of play the tough guy. I kind of like started hanging out with them for a bit. More to kind of get on their good side kind of thing, right? Like I never gave them any money or any chances to rip me off, except for one time where I kind of got ripped off $40 by Krakow Mako, but we ended up getting into a fight over it, and actually kind of turned out to be more comical than anything. And he felt bad about it because he was an addict, and I kind of understood where he was coming from, because fuck, man, I knew a lot of people that were crack addicts, and that shit just completely fucks with you. After watching what it did to my dad, like, he was paranoid that fucking cops were listening to every fucking phone call. It was ridiculous. Like, maybe he was, I don't know. Nowadays, jeez. But back then, 2007, it was kind of really not believable. I thought he was just kind of being crazy and shit, but I mean, he was getting into some, like, he told me some stuff that he did, and, you know, it was pretty fucked up. Like, stuff you could go to jail for a long time for if you told, you know, if you confessed to it. But, anyways, so I kind of, got to know people in Nelson and stuff, and I was at the Cottonwood Falls, ended up, there was like a guy who had a Mexican restaurant. He came down to the falls, and he knew the hippies were there, and he was asking if anyone wanted to work or needed a job. And I said, fuck yeah, I'll be a dishwasher, you know, and started working there and stuff. It was an awesome place to work. I got free burritos. I managed to get enough money to, you know, find a place to rent, and so I moved in with another person who I was working with and stuff. And thing is, 2008 was 2007 going into 2008, and so at that time, I wanted to kind of go home to visit my folks because, well, I'd been out for 2007, and my dad ended up coming, like my actual stepdad, come out to check on me a couple of months after I was in Nelson to make sure everything was all right. He ended up staying in the Stepping Stones for a bit, and we kind of didn't. He ended up going back to Ontario because my grandma spread some rumors that my mom was dating someone, and so that really didn't work out too well because my dad was like, what? And so he got on the bus right away, and when he got back, he actually, like, he beat the shit out of my mom to the point where, like, he fucking busted one of the eardrums, and, like, she was a singer, like, she still is, and that really fucked her career over because she needs to be able to hear properly when she's singing and stuff. Like, it was, you know, it really messed her up, and it took her years before she could actually get back to doing that again. And all because my grandma told me that she was, you know, seeing someone, but she actually wasn't. And my grandma kind of, you know, I probably shouldn't have said anything, but, like, he was my dad, and he came out there after my biological dad completely screwed me over, and I kind of felt like I owed it to him, you know, because I was in a pretty bad spot there for a bit. And that Mike Atkins guy, he ended up kind of not really being any use whatsoever, being one of those typical self-righteous asshole Christians. And, you know, I mean, I kind of was like, alright, fine, you know, nobody really needs to hold my hand or anything. And I managed to make my way in Nelson. I was living there for 3 years, and I did it all by myself. I got a job, I got a place to rent, I was loving it. I went back in 2008 for a few months to see my folks, and what happened was, the restaurant guy who I worked for was like a weird kind of, like, he was from Mexico, but he was really into that weird Santeria shit. Like, he was like, he would burn a red and white candle about 6 inches big each night to ward off evil spirits. And he was using, like, these candles at first that didn't have, like, these little things to stop the wax from melting all the way down. And that actually was kind of better than what he started doing with the cheaper candles. And because what it would do is that it would, like, completely melt itself overnight, and, like, I would come in the morning, or he had me coming in the at 12 o'clock, actually, no, 12 o'clock to about 6 or 7, no, 7 or 8, yeah. And at first, for the first couple hours, I'd be, like, cleaning up everything in the front dining room and stuff like that, and the first thing I would have to do is, like, scrape off this, like, giant pile of wax from, like, these tiles and stuff, and it was like screwing up his tiles, but he didn't care because he was all in his weird Santeria, and he was trying to bang one of the hostess chicks he hired to freaking I guess, like, she was a really good artist named Michaela or something like that, and she was a really cool lady. I actually had a lot of respect for her. She was super nice, and she was, like, drawing, like, cool stuff on artwork on the board and stuff like that with the menus and whatnot. And so people really liked going there that had some extra money, because at that time they had a place called Timberland, which was they had forest firefighting in there. So there's a lot of people that were coming from all over, because around that time they actually had some dry seasons from 2003 to 2007. But around that time, 2008 and onwards, it actually got very wet and mild, so they ended up moving back to Kelowna. So that took a huge part of the industry there, plus another lumber mill shut down at the same time. So all that excess tourist money that was coming in, because people were going up to Whitewater and just outside of Salmo, which was not too far away from Nelson, which people like to go for skiing, for snowboarding, for a bunch of stuff that they had, like rafting and cool stuff like that, rock climbing in the summer. So it was a very touristy place, like it still is. A lot of people go there just during the summer or the winter time for whatever exercise and stuff. And it's actually cheaper than Big White or Whistler for sure. Big White's just outside of Kelowna. They also had Red Mountain, which is kind of just out of Rossdale, outside of Trail. But Trail is kind of like a really kind of like a really kind of, it's like a mountain kind of like Hamilton in the middle, because they have like Kaminko, which is like a steel processing. They did all kinds of heavy metals and stuff like that. If you go to Trail, you definitely know why Trail is a joke, because it's like the people there are fucking crazy. There's like high lead content in the water, I think, or something. I don't know, man. But if you look around, like all the trees are like withered, like around Trail. Like they kept dumping like 100-ton of lead when I was like, I found out about that like a year after. So anyways, I ended up going back 2008. I ended up going to visit my family. Oh no, I was talking about the Mexican restaurant. And so what he had me doing is he had me coming in earlier to renovate the bathrooms and stuff, because I knew how to paint and stuff like that, and I was making it look really nice in there. And so at the end of the night, we close up and stuff, and he'd lit his candles there. But then I started noticing the last like 2 weeks before what happened, he started getting like these cheaper candles, and they had like these little like metal things in there. And then when I came in the morning a couple days, I noticed that it was actually like, it wasn't just burning down to like a pile of wax. It was actually like the metal part was like staying all the way apart and actually burning like tiny little holes and like kind of marking up the tiles. And so I told him, like, dude, you might want to like maybe use like the other candles or whatnot. He's like, oh no, Rosita, I know what I'm doing. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And so I went to go, how was it, just before I was originally gonna take a month or two off, no, a month off to see my family. He sits me down before the fire happens. There was a fire. And so he's like telling me, oh, Rosito, I don't think you should go home. And I'm like, why? And he's like, I had a dream. And he's like, I see you walking on the road. He thought I was going to hitchhike, but I had like money saved up, and like I was like staying at a place where I was like renting for a bit of time, and it was like kind of a border house kind of thing. And yeah, it was like because it's like the rooms were, it's so hard to find housing in Nelson, because it's such a small town. It's such a cool place. It has a high homeless population. So people that do want to find a house, it's, people are kind of just like looking to screw you over whatever way they can, pretty much. It's so hard to find a good house or a place to rent. So I was kind of renting out monthly from a person that was kind of doing like a B&B kind of thing, right? And so he was telling me, oh, don't go back. He was telling me like that he had a vision of me getting hit by a car hitchhiking back home. And I'm like, all right, well, I told him, I'm like, I'm going to be taking the bus. So it's the Greyhound. And it was like super cheap. It was actually only like $100 some odd to go there, back to Ontario, and like $250 to go there and back. And so I was thinking to myself, I was telling him that, and he was like, oh, okay. And then I think he wanted to kind of keep me there and whatnot. But anyways, like 2 weeks later, I was doing that whole thing with the making the bathroom area, because there was like a little bit of a hallway that went to his bathroom. It was ugly as sin. And so he asked me if I knew how to paint or whatnot, and I said, yeah, actually, yeah, that's what I was doing out in Kelowna. And so I was like 2 days into it. I was almost done. I was just about ready to finish off the thing, because he had a bunch of holes, and it was like really old. It was like and it was also like a building that was connected to an underground dance club and like another hostel on top, and they had they had like a hostel on top and like a dance club underneath. And I love the dance club there. It was really cool. It was called 198, and never roomed at the thing upstairs because it was like way too expensive. They had another place that was much more cheaper. They ended up looking into and staying a few nights. But anyways, I go there at 12 o'clock, and I notice there's like a bunch of smoke and stuff, and fire crews there, and I'm like, oh, what the heck happened? Because I was supposed to be there to paint. And they're like, oh, there was a fire here, and I said, oh my god. And I was like, please don't tell me it was the kitchen, because the night before I was working, and I closed everything down in the kitchen, and I was like, man, I really hope it wasn't something that I left on, or that I didn't, close properly or whatnot, or shut down properly, and like some wire started something. But they were saying, oh no, actually the kitchen was, aside from a lot of ash and smoke damage, was almost pretty much completely untouched. And I said, oh, and this was before, I guess, Juan was the name of the owner. And it sucked because there was Richard and I think Maria, and Richard was like a kind of like a tall white dude from Nelson who happened to just fall in love with his daughter, and like they had a son and stuff like that. And he was a super nice guy. And I guess they were not there yet, and I got there actually before they did, because they lived out, I think, in around Trail in Rossland or whatnot. So or I don't think the guy found about it who lived in Nelson, or maybe he was over there. I can't really remember the details so much. But the fire chief told me, no, actually the fire started in the dining room. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh man, let me guess, was it the candles? And he said, how did you know about the candles? And then I told him I worked there, and he said, yeah, we kind of suspected that it was candles. And I told him what happened. I probably shouldn't have, because of that stupidity. He didn't get insured, but I mean, they probably would have found about it either way. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't me that caused the fire. And I mean, I did notice that there were scorch marks from the cheap candles that he was using, and I did warn him for about a week that it was leaving marks on there, and that he might want to, like, because it was actually burning like into the tiles. And so anyways, that really kind of sucked, because like that screwed me over, because I actually spent like the previous check on rent for that month, because I was gonna use my pay 2 weeks afterwards to pay for my bus ticket. So I was stranded in Nelson. I only had like a month left from where I was staying, and I had no means of getting money. I mean, I could have gone on welfare because of the situation. But my grandma ended up talking to the Sally Ann, the Salvation Army, and they ended up sponsoring. They ended up paying for my ticket one way there for about $100 and some odd. And so that was really super nice of them, because like I used to go there, and they had like food and stuff like that for the homeless and whatnot, and we'd go there every now and then. And that was before I got like a job, and I was actually eating like regularly and stuff like that, so I didn't really have to go there after a bit. But I really did appreciate them and thank them for it. So I went home for about 4 months and got into some trouble in Amherstburg, which got me a criminal record. I kind of got blank out drunk and decided to fight a bunch of police officers because, well, my stepdad and my dad ends up showing up like, oh, I'm so sorry, what happened? And he tells me all the stuff, and he like, I guess my folks ended up tracking him down to where one of my uncles were, and they ended up phoning the police to do a wellness check. But when they went to check on him, they ended up like, I guess, looking into the van and seeing like a bunch of crack paraphernalia, and it was just like turned it into a complete drug den. And so he ended up getting impounded on my grandparents because they were trying to find out if he was okay. And so he was pretty resentful for that, but then he got in touch with us and apologized to me because he knew I was back, and he tried making it up to me, but he was one of those things where I knew he was still using and whatnot. And like that night though, we went to Emmitsburg because my mom was doing like a Patsy Cline and like a tribute show or whatnot, and like they were getting me drunk. Like I was drank way too much hard liquor, and when I get to the point where I'm in like kind of mode where I drink way too much hard liquor and get overloaded, I go into like this like euphoric state, and like I was happy because my mom was singing, and I was like, oh, that's my mom. I was all like dancing and like completely hammered, and I guess the guy who owned it, Uncle Vito or whatnot, was like not too happy, and he tried sending one of his bouncers after to either to get me to sit down or for me to like go outside. And I don't remember a damn thing about that night afterwards. So apparently I kind of got into a bit of a shoving match with the bouncer, and then I bumped into like the waitress by accident, and then they had me out back or whatnot, and then I guess the police, like, they just saw this drunk big guy and like didn't announce their presence, and they like grabbed me by the arm, and so I ended up punching one in the fucking face, fighting with them. And then I guess when they subdued me, I was like fucking crazy and started like, I spat at him, so they charged me with assault ×2 on a police officer. And I mean, I don't, this isn't bragging at all. Like, I actually have a decent amount of respect for the police officers and what they have to deal with, like domestic disturbances and bullshit like that on a regular basis. And man, they don't get paid enough. And to this day, I feel fucking horrible about it. And I really wish that I could have been in control of myself, but I had a lot of demons and a lot of anger penned up in me, and way too much alcohol and it was like I was just not there, you know? I mean, like, I obviously take full responsibility for my actions. I was on a gurney, like, they had to tie me down. They thought I was on some, like, crazy fucking drugs, but I was just ridiculously drunk. I, like, almost was breaking like, they thought I was possessed. That's how fucking crazy. And maybe from some religious sort of thing, maybe it was my inner demons or something taking control of me, because I don't remember a damn thing about that night, and it scares the shit out of me to the point now where I don't even really drink as much. You know, like, I barely drink. I can smoke my weight in weed and still be a happy-go-lucky guy, and, you know, maybe get the munchies or get tired. But when I get too much alcohol into me, there's like a certain part of my brain, I don't know if it was because I got some brain damage when I was younger or whatnot, from getting baseball bat up the head a couple times, or the times I used to run head first into freaking mailboxes in Burlington, because I had this ridiculous thing where I used to take out mailboxes by running into them, and people would get pissed off. And to be honest with you, in retrospect, it was a real dick move, because people could have been putting like valuable stuff to send in those boxes, and I probably destroyed the shit out of them. And like, for once, it probably wasn't the fault of the freaking parcel delivery person, like an Ace Ventura big detective, you know. But yeah, getting back to where I was talking about, it was kind of, it was not good. And so I did try to have, the thing was, it happened in Emmitsburg, and at the time I was living in Woodstock on like Springbank or something, and there was a bunch of times where I tried getting it dealt with. I was going to do year probation, and then like, I was going to do it so I could get, like, hopefully either switched out to BC or whatnot, or, you know, all that jazz. But they kept remanding it. Like, they remanded about 4 different times on me, and then the spring came around, and I was like, you know what? At that time, I did not think I was going to be coming back to Ontario, and I had more out in BC, and so I was just like, you know what? Fuck them. And that was a big mistake, because I got a bench warrant out for me, and I ended up getting it taken care of, but it was not fun. And so I ended up going back out to BC, and so I ended up getting 2 jobs out there, one in a restaurant, one in A&W, and it was an alright job, but I fucking hated it. It was mostly because I hate when people come in the last like 10 minutes and order stuff, full well knowing that it's like closing time, and like you're like cleaning stuff up and stuff. Like, I never do that to restaurants. If I know they're gonna close like even half an hour before closing, I'm like, I will not eat there, because I know it just pisses the restaurant staff off too much when people do stuff like that. But Oh, it's the stupid furnace thing, I think. But anyways, yeah, but I ended up being all right there. It was fun. I like met some cool people there. Some of the best weed I ever smoked was out in Nelson, and so I ended up living there for a bit. And then I went to, for 2008, I went to Victoria, and I was living outside in Victoria. But Victoria was one of the best places to actually be homeless in, because you could go to Spencer Smith Park, find a spot where there was like different areas of the park where you'd have to be kind of smart, because like I didn't know about this, and like I ended up getting like some weird propositions from some creepy dudes at one part of it. I'm like, okay. So then I said that to like a buddy who I happened to bump into like the next day, because they had this place where called Labor Unlimited. If anybody, I don't know if it's still running as well as it did before, but if anyone, like I was there in 2008, I believe, and 2008 was with like the freaking financial like meltdown pretty much, and they were still giving, like I had no problem finding temp jobs there. And the cool thing about Labor Unlimited in Victoria was that I would wake up from Beacon Hill Park and I would walk down to about a good 2-3 kilometers from where I was sleeping, because I had a little battery alarm clock thing that would wake me up, so I'd go to bed at a reasonable time, and like it was hard physical labor work, so I had no problem passing out as soon as like the sun went down pretty much, and like getting a good night's sleep. And nobody would really bug you, because I found out the better places to go for people who are homeless, there's like bushes you could go into there and nobody would mess with you and stuff. So I had like a tent and stuff like that I would set up, and it was kind of cool because like I bumped into a buddy who actually had some real problems with drugs, like crack and stuff like that. So it was kind of cool that we were both hanging out, because I kept him away from doing the drugs and stuff, and like we were both going to work. And the cool thing about Labor Unlimited, if you ever have a chance to, if you live in Victoria or whatnot, if you need hard cash or quick cash or whatnot, they would have a thing where they would pay you at the end of that day if you could get back in time. So it was pretty kick-ass and handy for that. So I'd wake up in the morning, get there for about 6 or 7, depending on what job they wanted, and they would either give you a bus to get out there, or so sometimes you'd be working a little bit later, so we wouldn't get back in time, or sometimes they'd have people that would carpool and give us a ride there, and then we would just be like, oh dude, here's $5, every couple of days, and they were fine with that, because that helped pay for gas, And I met some pretty cool people out there too, that were on the job site, and so we do a lot of like landscaping stuff like that. So it was one of the coolest places. I actually saved a lot of money being homeless in Victoria. Thing was, my buddy Nicky, who I actually like knew from Nelson, he went out to like Victoria and whatnot. He was like, this was like about a month before this thing called Shambhala in just outside of Samo, Nelson area. It's like this big hippie gathering where everybody gets all messed up on drugs and shit. Like they're not like they're okay about like bringing in like all kinds of like fucking like acid and like mind altering substances, but they get all fucking aggro on you if you bring too much water or fucking alcohol. It's like, pull fucking leaves. Like I'm definitely gonna, I had to sneak in with like fucking bladders and shit like that on the inside of it full of fucking whiskey, and then I sold it for like a shit ton of money, because there were people like, fuck, all these people are on drugs and shit, wish I had some alcohol. And there had other people that were doing the same thing too, that were kind of like that were like they brung it in on cars and stuff, but they had to pay like fucking $50 to like $60 for the couple days just to have their vehicle there parked, and it was a total rip-off. But the funny thing was, we wanted to go out there, and Buddy was like, oh, I know a way that we'll make a lot more money than what we've made, because at this point we've already made about 300, right? And like that was enough for like one ticket, plus I think we had enough covered for the cost to get in the bus back out there. So if we would have stayed in Victoria, we would have made more than enough to get back out to like have Shambhala paid for. But this guy decides, oh no, we'll go to Cash Corner in Vancouver. And so I'm like, what's Cash Corner in Vancouver? And he's telling me, oh, it's this place where next to the Ontario Science, the BC Vancouver Science Center that they have there next to the marina area, where, and like the SkyTrain spot where it's called Ontario Street, and I'm thinking, oh, Ontario Street, I'm from Ontario, so I thought it was pretty funny. Sorry, voice stacked up on here. So we go there, and the first week that we get there, they have a shit ton of RCMP. Apparently, they had a crackdown on illegal immigration. They had all these Mexicans that came up that were illegally working for like $6 an hour, when originally the premise of Cash Corner in Vancouver is you go there in the morning, and whatever landscaping, construction, any kind of like stuff where they don't want to pay their laborers like $15 or $20 an hour because of the Vancouver city laws and shit like that, they would pay maybe $12 to $14 an hour and cash. And you would just show up there in the morning and be like, they'd be like, oh, do you have any of this experience? And you could be like, oh, yes, I do, or maybe not, or whatnot. And they'd be like, all right, get in, you know? And so I guess because the Mexicans were there doing it for like $6 to like $8 an hour, it pissed a lot of the people off, and I guess they had immigration cracked down. So the very week that we go there, immigration completely cracking down on it. Like, people are not going near the street because they're like, oh, well, if we're gonna get busted, they're gonna take, you know, our license plate down, note the company that we're running, and, you know, like, maybe inquire or something. So, like, we were lucky to get, I think that whole week, we got like 2 jobs each, and it was like, for like $50-$60, it was pretty much nothing. Really, it was just for a couple hours of work here and there. And at that time, we were like also having to eat food, so we put a lot of that money in the money we had saved. And then the second week, it just pissed out raining, like just completely pissed out raining. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that the week before, immigration was there. So we're screwed. We've got like $100 between both of us, which managed to make it. We managed to make out like hitchhiking out to Hope, and then from Hope managed to get. We could have gone the easy way through like Merritt and like the Grand Forks area, but we ended up finding someone that gave us a ride, but we went all the way up to fucking Kamloops. So we got a ride to Kamloops, and then at that point we were like, dude, we've got like $20 between both of us. We split it, so we had 10 each, and then he went his way, and I'm thinking we got to split up because and we didn't realize too that it's illegal to hitchhike outside of Kamloops. And so we get to Kamloops, and we get out, we start walking, and before we even get like halfway past the city limits of Kamloops, we get stopped by a police officer that starts like checking us, like, who are you, you know, like, what kind of, do you guys have any criminal records and stuff? And then he's like, oh, you got something out in Ontario? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not going back to Ontario. He's like, oh, fair enough. He's like, so where are you boys going? And I'm like, we're going to Nelson. He's like, oh, Nelson, huh? He's like, you don't have any illegal substances on you. And like, the guy was actually pretty funny. Like, I had to say, like, the guy had a sense of humor. He knew that we weren't like convicts because we were like joking around with him too, right? And we weren't like sketchy or anything like that. We were really friendly with him. And I was like, well, officer, if we were coming from Nelson, then you'd have a reason. And then he just thought that was hilarious. And so he was like, all right, you guys, you know, you're not supposed to be hitchhiking here. I'm like, dude, we had no idea. We were just taking, like, we were waiting by Merritt and or Hope or whatnot. No, Merritt, yeah, because it's like country music, and that like has two places where we could have gone. One, there was like people going to Kamloops like a lot more than there were people going the other way, which would have been quicker, but we ended up taking whatever we could get, right? And so he was like, fine. And so then just before we get out the outside city limits, another police officer comes and pulls us over and does the same thing. But this guy was a total asshole. And but you know, he was like, oh, okay, there's nothing wrong here. You guys go. And he's like, oh, you guys know you're not supposed to hitchhike. And we're like, sir, I mean, we got told by the last officer who pulled us over, but we had no idea beforehand that it was illegal to hitchhike here. I mean, plenty of people hitchhike through BC, especially through like the lower mainland valley Okanagan area. But when you get to like Kamloops, for some reason, it's like the mid part of the area. But when you go up northern or mid BC, there's people that hitchhike all the time because you're going like hours and hours between cities. And, you know, you don't want people, like, the reason why people pick up hitchhikers is because it's actually fucking dangerous out there. There's mountain lions, there's fucking grizzly bears, there's even rattlesnakes in certain areas. It's like fucking wilderness. And so, yeah, we ended up splitting up in Kamloops. I ended up getting out to Kelowna, and I had absolutely no money. And I was waiting, nobody was picking me up. And there's like this really long Highway 33, and I didn't realize that it was like pretty much no man's land. And I got to the point where I'm waiting. I waited half a day. Nobody was gonna I wasn't getting any ride hitchhiking. So then I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I decided to walk, and I walked like for 2 days straight, pretty much, to what was it? Well, I can't remember the tiny little place outside, but it got to the point where I like ran out of water, and I was like fucking dying of thirst for like a day, and it was just brutal. But then I was so lucky because there was a guy and another friend of his that was coming all the way down from Alaska, and they were coming down this road, and like they were I didn't see any cars for about like an hour before these two passed me by, and like they went to the side, and then like the one guy was like, he had like a radio or whatnot, and so the guy kind of like got out of his car, and he's like, do you need a ride? And he's like, and before you answer that, like, why are you out here alone? And I just told him, I was like, well, I told him my situation and told him that I was trying to get to Nelson. And they were going to Grand Forks, and then I think they were going to the States or whatnot, but they managed to get me to Grand Forks. And then I managed to get to a payphone, phone my grandparents, and they sent me $20 because I was like dying of freaking thirst, and so I used that to get like some water and some food, which was awesome of them. I really hated having to phone them and ask them about it, because that whole time I was pretty much doing everything by myself, self-reliant. I had like a really strong back. I had no problem walking miles and miles and miles, obviously. And I was really lucky that those people from Alaska saved my ass, because I could have easily fucking died out there, because I had another like 3 days to go, and I had absolutely no water, and like I probably would have died, but it would have just been brutal and excruciating. And yeah, so I managed to get to Grand Forks, and then it was like no problem. I got to Nelson, and I find out the guy who like we split up in in Kamloops, ended up getting there like a day and a half before I did, and I'm just like, oh, you motherfucker! It's because I'm a big guy, right? So people probably thought I was scary and didn't want to give me a ride. So I swear I would never do that hitchhiking bullshit again. So ever since then, I made sure that I had like a backup plan and like taking the Greyhound bus and stuff. So that was interesting. And then I managed to like settle down in Nelson. I did kind of like, I was like, no more going out to the coast, or no more of that crap, because I didn't want to be put in that situation again. And so I was, settled down in Nelson. I had a really had my own was renting my own room and whatnot, and then moved in with another buddy who I was working with at A&W again, because I ended up getting rehired there, and because they knew I was a good worker. But I kind of left on bad terms, because they had this chicken deep fryer that like wouldn't, like, the guy was cheap, he wouldn't replace it. It was like malfunctioning, obviously, to the point where it was undercooking chicken on a regular basis, and the sensor was like beeping like annoyingly long. Even when it did get up to temperature, it was just like beep, 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 and you're like, after like 3 fucking hours and you're trying to close, it gets annoying. And then they actually had this thing where to reset it, we would like have to like hit it with our fist, and just boom, and then it would like kick the sensor in and like heat the temperature up. But there were many times we actually got complaints of people that had undercooked chicken because we're using that fryer, and like it was a fucking health hazard. And the guy who owned the fucking place, John, was too much of a fucking cheap prick to actually get the fucking thing fixed. He'd rather have them get sued because of fucking salmonella poisoning before he'd actually do something about the fucking place. And so, I was closing, and I don't know, I was kind of pissed off, and I did kind of fucking give the thing a boot, but I didn't think it would like completely fuck up the thing. And sure enough, the the next day I was fired, and that was not fun. But I also kind of before that happened, I lived in like a place with like a room and board kind of thing for a bit, and then I moved in with another dude who I was working with at A&W, when we are both splitting the costs for the place. But what happened was the house we were staying in, the water heater was underneath, and the guy who owned the place lived in fucking New Zealand, and so he was renting this place out through a realtor thing, because it's hard to find places to rent in Nelson, and he was making his money and just living in New Zealand. And what happened was the water heater started leaking, and it was in the summertime, and it started heating up, and it heated up right underneath us to the point where it was so hot and so moist that like even when I was washing, like doing the dishes and like having it out to dry, it wouldn't dry. It would start to grow mold on there because it wouldn't like dry properly. And then I got like really bad, like I have like a bunch of, like I have no problem and I barely get sick with a lot of stuff, but if it's kind of like a mold inhalation thing, then it really it takes me down pretty much. Like if I got like some, like yeah, it was like months of just constantly getting sick to the point where I actually passed out at work once because I was so white, and like it was really bad. Like I was having problems swallowing. I was like having problems. My tonsils swelled up on me and whatnot. And so they finally, after I've spent about like $300 on antibiotics and stuff to try to like make my fever and everything go down from the mold, because that's the only time I ever have like any really allergic reactions is from mold and stuff like that in my lungs. And like I have a really great immune system, but if something gets into my lungs or like with mucus and grossness there, then and I get an infection that way, then it completely kicks my ass. So they finally found out that the water heater was leaking, and I managed to get like $300 reimbursement out of it after like almost dying. And so I ended up lucking out and getting a place that was subsidized with me and my my ex-girlfriend, Tanya, who she was a nice person, but she had a huge amount of baggage. She wasn't really the brightest person. Like I have to like always spell out words for her and stuff, but to me, I was kind of living in Nelson. It was like the pickings were slim, to say the least. There was I don't know, it was like there was more guys than there were girls. And it was always like the chicks were always into like, you know, the whatever hippie or whatever alpha kind of acting male, you know. Like for me, I mean, like I would kick ass when I had to and shit like that, but I mean, I wasn't like I never really had a lot of luck with ladies. Like at this point, this was like 5 years after Steph, and like aside from like the odd random lucky hookup with a chick, you know, it happened a couple times, it was really slim pickings. So I just kind of got used to being alone and, you know, being a big guy. Like there was this chick named Kat who was really cool and she was kind of into me, but then she ended up like going for my buddy Nikki, and that kind of pissed me off, so I kind of stopped like talking to him for a bit. And you know, it was just kind of like stupid stuff like that. But there's this chick named Tanya. She was really cool, and you know, she was nice and all that stuff. And at the time, she was actually paying half, you know, because we had this like subsidized house thing that we're living at together, and it was nice, you know. But then pretty much the whole thing with A&W happened. I had another job, but it wasn't really like it didn't pay enough to pay the rent, really. I mean, I could have gone on welfare and stuff like that, but at the same time, I got a phone call from my folks back in Ontario, and they were saying that there was a place called Precon that was hiring. So they were paying like $20 to $20 an hour for like labor jobs, and so they were just they were looking for people like crazy. And so at the time, my mom's husband now was working there at the time before they were married, and pretty much was like, hey, I could probably get you in here and whatnot. So realizing that there really wasn't much in Nelson, because it turned into a tourist town where it wasn't really, it was rainy for a lot of the season for 2008, 2009. So a lot of people didn't come in the summertime. It was mostly in the wintertime where they had people that would show up to the mall area or whatnot. A lot of people kind of kept to themselves and stayed out in the valley or went to trail or the other place that was close to it. But Osamo or I can't remember where the Castlegar. That's where it was. They also had an airport there that like nobody should ever use because they call it Cancelgar because like the way that the airport is set up, it's like right next to where the any kind of like fog or low-lying cloud cover completely cancels all the flights. Like it is like renowned for anybody that tries to go out to the Kootenays. If you're going to take a plane to Castlegar, it's 50-50 pretty much. Just like expect to not be able to get a flight to Castlegar. The best way is to, sadly, unless you know like the Kootenay Co-op or like ride shares that they have online, you have to pretty much go and fly to Kelowna and then take an 8-hour bus ride from Kelowna on the Greyhound to Nelson or Castlegar, wherever you're going to there, because there's a few places you can go to. So it was definitely a pain in the butt. So yeah, I kind of got lured to going back to here in Woodstock. So I talked to my ex-girlfriend. At the time, she was she had a child that was well, she had like a custody thing because the problem was, you see, she was molested by her actual biological dad, and so she was taken out of that home and put into a foster home with a family, and they were nice people, and so I knew she had some issues and stuff like that, and because she had a low IQ, they were very they weren't going to give her kid back. And I thought it was pretty ridiculous because just down the road they had Bountiful, just outside of Creston, and that place is like a fucking Warren Jeffs fucking offshoot where they all dress up in those like fucking weird outfits, and there's like one like 60-year-old guy fucking a bunch of like 16 to fucking 20-year-old girls, and all the kids don't get educated properly, and then the males have no education whatsoever and get thrown out into the fucking world to fend for themselves until they get older and they come back, and then they can have all the pussy they want. It's a really weird fucking place out there. All kinds of fucking sexual fucking shit going on there that would make fucking, when Children's Aid Service was actually doing their job, they'd have like a field day with that place. But no, they're going after people in Nelson who are actually trying. Like we had a place where we had an extra room open for if we did have her son Jacob and stuff like that, and she really we even went to parenting courses. Like I was ready to settle down and stuff, and in a way I'm kind of glad that things did kind of work out the way that they did, because once it was kind of sudden too, so I have to admit, like, I did kind of like put that pressure on by saying, well, I don't really have like much going on here in BC in Nelson, and there's not much work going on, but we could like go move to Ontario, because at that point, and it was ridiculous, like I came into like this whole kind of situation as just kind of like the new kind of boyfriend thing, and like this is like 2 years that she was fighting for her son, and her lawyer was pretty much like, I went to a thing with her, and because the lawyer said, hey, maybe you should, with your new boyfriend, go maybe take some parenting courses because it would look good for you. And I was all for it, because at that point I was like, hey, you know what, I don't mind raising someone else's kid. He's like 2-3 years old, maybe I could be a good dad. I was ready to settle down, because I was kind of thinking about Steph and thinking about if I, because I did kind of care and love her more than the chick I was with, Tanya, and I really hate kind of admitting that, but at the time I was completely in love with her too, because 5 years alone and someone that actually gives a shit about you, and like it was weird because like I went from like nobody wanting anything to do with me relationship wise after being a fucking badass and like not fucking taking shit from nobody and doing my own thing in Nelson, and then I had a chick from work from A&W, I can't even remember her name now. Yeah, can't remember her name. But she was like into me, and then like I showed some interest in her, but then she was telling me how she was like, you know, having feelings for some other guy. So I was like, all right, well, I'm not getting into that fucking bullshit. And then there was another chick who was like, apparently out of nowhere got all interested in me and stuff like that. And then Tanya was like, oh, I like Roy all of a sudden, because she was like talking to my buddy who was like an older dude, and he kind of told me about it. So like all of a sudden, out of the blue, I had 3 girls that were into me, and I'm like, well, 2 of them I knew that were into me. I didn't know that the other one was like pissed off that I had a girlfriend after. Michelle, that was her name, the one from work, and Tanya and another girl, I can't remember her name. I think it was Holly or something, I don't know. But yeah, so that was just kind of overwhelming, but I wasn't like gonna, you know, like I was with Tanya, and then like this other chick wanted to like get with me, and I'm like, well, I'm not gonna, you know, because I know how this fucking story works out. You know, you get a guy that, you know, is lonely and shit like that. All of a sudden there's like girls that are into him, and so he's like with one girl, and then all of a sudden you know, like you go for someone else to kind of like, you know, see if, you know, which one you like the best, and then it turns out that you get completely fucked over, and then you end up completely alone, right? So I was like, fuck that shit, you know, I'm with the chick that, you know, first wanted to like, you know, be in a relationship with me, because I wasn't fucking around, you know. I'm not the kind of guy. At that point I was actually very mellowed down. I just drank some beer every now and then, and like was mostly smoking weed, but like that didn't bother me as much as like the kind of soul destroying stuff of when I was like doing like all kinds of fucked up drugs in Ontario and in a bad place. Like when I was out in BC, I was very at peace. It's just such a beautiful place. Like it's like if you ever get like to the point where you're just pissed off or lonely, you just go outside and you're like, wow, this is beautiful. I am lucky to be alive and lucky to be living out here. I highly recommend anybody who has that kind of inkling for nature to go out to Nelson or to BC, or heck, even up north or whatnot. You know, it's just such a peaceful feeling. You know, I was so at home being able to go out into the woods and camp, or, you know, do whatever the hell I wanted. They had Pulpit Rock, which is like a decent, well, it took about 45 minutes just to walk past the big orange bridge, even though it's like the salmon color now because of the weather and stuff. It's like the big pink bridge now, but I think they paint it over every couple years or whatnot. But just outside of that, they had this place called Pulpit Rock, and it was like a good 45-minute hike up there. It was really hard on like just the legs and everything, but once you got up there, it was a beautiful view, and then you could go walk up higher, and just an amazing view up there if you wanted to do that. That took about 3 hours and stuff, but I mean, I loved it out there. It was so much fun, but I knew there wasn't really that much there for work, and so that's why I came back to Ontario. So we ended up oh yeah, I talked to her lawyer, and she was like, oh well, you know, she has a low IQ or whatnot, and I said, oh, okay. And like, I was an outside dude on this, and this is just before she was about to find out that she wasn't going to get her kid back. And so I was like, okay, well, if she, like, I said, when did she have this IQ test? And they said, oh, let me check, the lawyer. And then the lawyer was like, oh, she had it when she was 16. At this time she was like, I think 25, 26, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if she had that IQ test like 10 years ago, I mean, could she take another IQ test? And then the lawyer was like, oh, I never thought of that. And it's like, what? You're her lawyer, you know? Like, I'm a dude who like, and I didn't say that to her, because I'm like, this is what I'm thinking in my head, right? Because I'm like, what the fuck? But you know, because I told Tanya after, I'm like, you know, this is your legal defense. She should be thinking about this more, you know, like a lot more. And then here I am, I just like a guy who just like happens to find out some of the information, and I'm like, hey, wait a second, how come you haven't done an IQ test now, or why can't you do another one, you know? And so the lawyer was like, oh, okay, we'll do that, and we'll try that out. And so sure enough, they got her to do an IQ test. But the thing was, I should have seen some signs there. I was ready to like help her out, like teach her and stuff like that. Like I was practically spelling out all the words that she was fucking writing down anyways, because I'm good at spelling. Well, I used to be. Now I also have a shitty keyboard that kind of makes my spelling errors for me. But anyways, so she, about 2 weeks before she's going to take this IQ test, and I'm trying to get her to, you know, do some like actual brain exercises, like getting her to do some stuff that's actually going to be on the IQ test, but instead she finds like some stupid game thing on Facebook that like is like a stupid word fucking thing, and I'm like, maybe like 5% of the questions will have anything maybe possibly related to that, but she wouldn't listen to me anyways, and she's like, oh, I'm learning, and she got a little bit higher, but still kind of just around the retarded thing for IQ. So I kind of felt bad for her. I really did, because I knew how much she wanted her son. But the thing was, at that point, they said, nope, I'm sorry, and not only did she have her son Jacob taken away, given to another foster family, but they told her that if she ever had a kid again in British Columbia, that it would be taken away. And I was so pissed off, because I knew about the Bountiful situation 20 minutes down the fucking road, and yet they're taking kids away from people that actually are trying. And I've seen that before when I lived in subsidized housing. There was times where there were people who were clearly abusing their kids, that clearly did not give a fuck about their kids, that were completely A-okayed by the fucking system. And there were people that were trying as hard as they could, but because they had a bad boyfriend, or because they had low IQ, or just stuff beyond their real fucking measure of their control, for the most part, they had the full force of Children's Aid come down and be like, no, we are the state, you cannot have your child, you know. And so that kind of fucking pissed me off about the whole Children's Aid thing. I mean, I understand there's certain situations where they're definitely needed. I actually have a friend who I talk to from the UK who deals with like abused children all the time. She deals with like 4-year-olds that have fucking cigarette burns all over their fucking bodies from stupid fucking parents and shit like that, and that pisses me off. And I definitely see where there's that need to have, you know, state care. But I've seen it go bad so many times in the opposite way that I'm very skeptical. And so we ended up, I told her, like, listen, you've got every much reason to want to leave BC as I do. At least where we're going, I'll be able to start a new life. We can get a place. We can settle down and stuff. So I was like 2-3 hours into this life story thing. I don't even think anybody's gonna be listening to this shit. I don't even know why I'm recording this stuff right now. But I don't know, just something I need to do. So anyways, she had like 22 totes of stuff. Like I always traveled light. Like I had maybe like 2 bags of stuff and like a computer, and like that was pretty much it. And she had like 22 totes of stuff, so we ended up having to spend like $1,200 just to ship all of her shit out. And so we managed to do that. And my brother was also doing a Justin Bieber impersonation thing, and he was doing gigs, so he sent like a $300-400 out to help us too, which I really appreciated, even to this day. Yeah, he was awesome for that. And we got out to Ontario, and then it was like a completely different person. Like, she would not pay for half the stuff. Like, it was me paying for everything, because she's pretty much like, well, you got me out here kind of thing, that situation. And I felt bad, because I'm like, yeah, I kind of did. So, you know, I was trying to. The thing was, by the time we got out there, they already done their first wave of hiring, so it was about 2-3 months before I actually got hired. But they managed to get her on disability. This is like, I was on kind of like welfare, because I was looking for a job pretty much, and came out from BC. And so she was actually like hoarding her money, because I guess she kind of in her mind figured she was probably going to be going back to BC anyways and breaking up with me. And so my nan, she used to go to the casino with my grandma, because she like connected with my grandma, and I figured, hey, she's having a good time with my grandma, and I'm like, fine with that. But then my nan was like telling me, yeah, she's hiding like thousands of dollars from you after like, I think about like 4 months. And then I ended up getting a job with Precon. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, this shit, yeah, I understand she's doing that for, you know, whatever reason. and like we didn't have to, she wasn't paying rent or anything like that, or you know, so I really didn't, you know, think too much of it. We were kind of staying in like a very an apartment with my grandma, and like everybody was stuck in there. It was like my, at one point it was my grandma, grandpa, myself, my ex-girlfriend, I think it was my brother and my sister, so it was like 6 people in a small like 2-3 bedroom apartment, and that was not fun. So I ended up getting hired at Precon after they're doing a second wave of run, and apparently they needed a bunch of people for the TDC that they're going to do. And what happened was, I guess Rob and Doug Ford, they went for the above TDC thing. So I was working for Precon for about 2.5 months, and just before I got unionized, I ended up, because I was putting in like these steel end ladders and stuff, and I ended up screwing up my spine. I didn't realize what the problem was because I was reaching down really low. I was a big frame guy, and I was a lot thinner than what I am now, but I'm still a big guy. So having to like put in like steel end ladders when I was like bending over to like the where like my shins were, pretty much, I managed to, I was either that or using the cheap grinder discs. They wouldn't spend money for decent grinder discs, which is, it makes the world of difference when you're cutting out nibs from these like steel cages that they're putting in to pour concrete forms and stuff. So there was a lot of heavy lifting and stuff there too. And I mean, I did a lot of backpacking, heavy lifting and stuff when I was out west, and I never had a problem with it. Maybe like my back would get a little sore, I would just chillax for the weekend, be ready to go Monday, you know. But I noticed that I went home one Friday and I was just in so much pain, and I took a bunch of Robaxacet, a bunch of Tylenol 3s, because at that time my grandpa had knee surgery, and so he had a bunch of Tylenol 3s because he wasn't really taking them. And I was like, I was in so much pain, and so I went to the doctor. And the thing was, I didn't have a family doctor because I like moved around so much. I had like a doctor when I was like, geez, like 6 or 7 in Guelph, but like that doctor Hosdale, she retired a long time ago. So yeah, I didn't have a family doctor, and never really needed one up until that point. So I ended up going to the emergency room 6 separate times over a 6-month period, and after. This is after I ended up getting, like just before, like I was taking Tylenol 3s, Robaxacet, and trying to work through the pain, the back pain. And what happened was, I guess Rob or Doug Ford, they ended up getting rid of the tunnel extension for the TDC, which was the contract that they had at Precon. And they went for the above light rail transit system, and doing that pretty much killed the contract that they had here in Woodstock. And all of a sudden about 400, 500 people were laid off just like that. And I guess it was kind of one of those things where if they do a lot of hiring, you know, they were trying to get the contract out of the way to get it done, so they'd be like, here we go, and then it's all paid for. But then there was that whole thing, and Doug and Rob Ford, or I think it was Rob Ford that did it originally, and went for the cheaper thing because he was trying to save people of Toronto, right? So it ended up screwing us over. And I had a screwed up back, and I didn't know it because I was going to the emergency. I was in so much pain. Every time I went to the emergency, it was some bullshit doctor that was like, oh, you'll be fine. Here's some anti-inflammatory and some like Tylenol 3s. And it would help a little bit for 2 weeks, but then I'd still be in so much pain. And after the 6th time that I went to the freaking, and this is after like, you know, EI was not really paying out, and I ended up getting a job at Tim Hortons in the night shift, and I was in so much fucking pain, it was not funny, and it was ridiculous. And so I kept going to the doctors, and on the 6th time that I went to the doctor, he ended up getting an MRI, and then it showed up that I had 3 discs in my spine that were messed up. I had 2 discs that were desiccated and 1 that was bulging, and the desiccated disc had pieces broken off that were going right in my sciatic nerve. That was the reason why I was having problems even standing. It was just so much pain. And then I was working at Tim Hortons on the night shift, and like it got to the point where I started off as like 4-hour shift, and then I needed the money because we moved into an apartment, and I was paying for most of the stuff there, even though my ex was getting like plenty of cash. She was just spending it on like fucking pet store stuff because she ended up volunteering at the friendly pet city store that we had like right next to where we were living, at this really cheap place that I should never have moved into, agreed to moved in. It's just my grandparents were kind of getting enough. We're getting sick of Tanya kind of being a pain in the ass, and so we ended up moving into this place called the Regency downtown Woodstock, and it had some really shady characters. Like, the people above us were fucking partying and fucking doing all kinds of stupid shit and fucking making all kinds of noise, and they ended up getting kicked out 6 months into the fucking place, and they replaced it with a guy who beat the shit out of his girlfriend and stuff. And I went up there a couple times, and it was got to the point where we actually had to phone the fucking police. I don't like phoning the cops at all, but it gets to the point where they're like, where it sounds like a dude is mercilessly beating the shit out of his girlfriend. It's either the police go up there or I go up there, and it's not going to be fucking pretty if I go up there. In fact, one of the times I actually went right to his fucking face outside the fucking door and confronted him, and he was like doing that stupid thing. All those like fucking pieces of shit that think that they're fucking, top shit. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? When they say that shit, I have this instinctive fucking desire to beat the shit out of their fucking face until it is fucking mulch, man. Because every fucking place I've gone to, it's always the weakest fucking person, the most piece of shit fucking person that tries to go off on their reputation. And I'm like, I do not know who the fuck you are, nor do I give a shit who the fuck you are. I mean, I was living on fucking, at one point we was like, in Vancouver for about a good 2 months. I was living there for a bit, like on the streets, and there's people that would fucking stab. I got into fucking tons of fights there just being a fucking normal human being, and like I had no fucking problem kicking some ass and shit like that because I'm a pretty good fighter. My dad taught me, and I still got a good couple fights left in me if it comes down to it, even though my back is fucked now. I probably couldn't do anything with my feet or really move fast, but I can move pretty fast with my hands for a big guy. But yeah, that saying, it was just a horrible fucking place to live because my ex she got lonely, so she started making friends with people in that place, and they just kept ripping her off, and like she was bringing sketchy people over when I had my fucking wall on top of the fridge, and that was just a fucking no-no. Like, I'm lucky I didn't get robbed $500 and we were out fucking because I had this one chick there that was named Kimmy who like fucking gives head for fucking cigarettes and shit like that. Like, it's just really fucking scummy place to live. And we did not know about it when we first moved in there. Like, it looked kind of cheap, but, it got to the point where it was a fucking gong show. And, yeah, so that was not fun. And then, while I was working, I ended up slipping on some coffee grounds. I was, like, at the end of my shift, and some idiot was coming in on the morning crew, and we were in a rush, and I slipped, and that did it in. That little slip just completely screwed my back over to the point where I couldn't even stand for, like, I was having problems with all kinds of shit. So I ended up finally getting the MRI and having the doctor being like, no, Roy, you shouldn't be working right now until you get this stuff fixed because it is pretty bad. It was severe spinal stenosis. It was going right into my sciatic nerve to the point where even today I've been spending the past since the spring, because the winter was really hard for me because I tried walking many times because I'm not too far away from the aquatic center, but if there's any ice on the road, like we had a really brutal winter this year, and one slip on the ice and I am done for fucking like 2 weeks. Like, it's bad with my back. I only have about 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours if I'm lucky, of juice, we can call it, in my back. It's like, the stuff that kind of like adrenaline that keeps you going, where you're in a lot of pain, but you don't really feel it, especially, I'll like sleep and I'll be fine in the morning. Like, I'll still probably feel it when I wake up. If I go up any steps, I feel it. It's pretty much like a feeling of like 1,000 little fucking tiny little cracks in your spine going in your fucking, it's I don't want to explain it without getting too gross, but it is really painful. And like, even now, because what happened was I lost my job at Precon, and I had a place, and so I'm like, shit, I need to pay rent. And my ex wasn't helping me at all. Like, in the 13 months that we lived at that place, she maybe gave me what $60 towards paying rent. And like, she did pay for groceries and stuff like that, but I was also paying for groceries too, so it was like, you know, not really fair compared to like what we had out in BC. And then so she started talking to her friend out back in BC and stuff like that, and so she's like breaking up with me as I'm because my dad kind of pissed her off too. My stepdad is still my dad, you know, consider him my father. And what happened was he kind of knew that she was kind of, you know, so he was joking around about this dog that she had, because every time he kept coming over, she was volunteering at the pet store, and we kept getting more and more animals, right? And he's thinking to myself, like what the hell is wrong with this lady? And, you know, she obviously wanted to have a kid, and I'm wanting to settle down, but I'm like, I'm injured now. I lost my job. This is really not the best time to bring a kid into the world. And, you know, we're living in a really fucking shitty spot that if we had a kid with a baby, we would have nothing but noise complaints from the asshole fucking druggies around us, because, God forbid, we have a baby in the fucking Regency where they can, you know, bang whatever fucking heroin and fucking beat the shit out of each other as much as they want, you know. God forbid we, you know, interfere with their noise, you know. Fucking pricks. I don't, you know, I think I regret just not punching that motherfucker right in the face. But anyways, on a non-violent kind of tangent, yeah, so she started like hanging out with people and stuff like that, not coming home till like 2 o'clock in the morning. And at that time, I was like, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm like, I'm not cool with, you know, being a cuck in this relationship. So you can go fuck yourself. You can start paying rent, and you can kiss my ass, because I'm moving the fuck out. And so I right away, once she started pulling that shit, I'm like, yeah, okay, this is done. You know, fuck you. Like, I've, you know, done everything I can. I'm in a lot of pain. And then, sure enough, my dad gets fucking cancer. And so this bitch fucking decides to leave me at the worst time of my fucking life, as I got like a fucked up, like, I lose my job, my back is fucking, I'm in so much goddamn pain, and then I end up losing pretty much the apartment because, you know, she had to pay for it. And I'm like, my folks were like, well, you know, might as well come stay with us. And I was like, all right, you know, I've got no other option, so, you know. And I couldn't stay in that fucking building anymore because the people there were just scumbags. And I don't like to be the kind of person that, you know, puts myself higher than anyone. But, you know, it comes down to, if you hang out with scummy fucking people, then you're gonna have nothing but fucking drama. And that's just a fucking universal truth of life. And I'm sorry, but out of all the places that I've lived so many places, moved so many parts of fucking southern Ontario, out west, done all kinds of, yeah, there's times where I did backpacking, where I did go out, you know, east and west and stuff like that. Never gone up to the Northern Territories or to like Yukon or Nunavut or any of that crap, because, well, if you don't have a vehicle and you don't have a job out there waiting for you, you're paying way too much, and you've got a risk of getting stabbed to death for a paycheck for one, freezing to death for one, you know, getting stranded somewhere in the middle of fucking nowhere, becoming like that fucking Into the Wild fucking movie where the guy goes to Alaska and shit. Not well, the way I want to turn out. So I always kind of like stayed to the more populated areas, but you get to see like all the different parts of Canada and what people are like and stuff. So, you know, it's pretty cool that way. But anyways, so I ended up moving back with my folks, and it was kind of shitty, because then she ended up, I guess, like 2 weeks after we kind of broke up, she was like fucking some dude she like moves in with a month later. Like a month beforehand, it's like February, she had me taking these 2 cats that she adopted from the pet store. And then she's like, oh, I'm moving in with some guy, and he doesn't want the pets. So she was going to leave my fucking, well, a really adorable orange fucking short hair tabby, but it's crossed with a Mancoon, which was just horrible for trying to keep his fucking fur maintained. And another kind of like a white and black kind of long hair cat. And she was going to fucking kick him out into the fucking outside in the middle of fucking winter. And so I was just like, you heartless cunt. So I ended up taking the cats, and ended up having to find homes for them because, well, we had a bunch of cats over where I was and stuff, and it was fucking heartbreaking. And I tried taking care of Garfield because he was really attached to me. He was like this orange fuzz ball that I just loved to death. You know, it was heartbreaking because he ended up having like he got matted a lot. You know, because he's like a short hair tabby crossed with a Mancoon, which is, you know, big paws, big hair. So he would get routinely matted, and I managed to like chip away with scissors and stuff when we would come up here, and I'd cuddle with him and stuff like that. But as soon as he saw those scissors and he knew what I was up to, man, he fucking just bolted. Or I tried to get the shaver, and like before I was able to shave, I did a really good job for about 4 years of all the coats that he had and stuff. But what happened was, it got to the point where even though I managed to get all the stuff from the side of him, he had like some stuff right on his like underbelly and going to where his like, you know, parts were and stuff. And the thing was, it was really hard for me to groom him. Like, he would not have any of it. And then I guess it got to the point where he did get a urinary infection and stuff, and so like I thought we had to put him down. And good thing is that we managed to catch it in time, but it still cost a lot of money, and my nan paid for it, which was really awesome because she knew how much I love that cat, and she loves animals too. But she ended up giving him to a home, to a lady that now is able to like take him to a professional groomer on a regular basis, kind of thing. So he's in a good home, but to be honest with you, it really did feel just kind of like a fail. And it was painful. It was, I mean, I sunk into the fucking deepest depression I've ever been in. It was brutal, man. You know. And then had to deal with my dad dying. That was my stepdad, but he raised me ever since I was about 4 or 5. And you know, he was more of a dad than my biological father, who, after that whole thing, I mean, we haven't heard from him at all. Like, and to be honest with you, I think he's probably fucking buried in an unmarked grave somewhere, because he fucking did a lot of things, and a lot of bad things. And crack, man, that shit'll catch up to you. And paranoia. And he pissed me off when I was out there, and I managed to kick his ass when we got into an argument when he was trying to get me to cover for his fucking around on that Sue lady, because I didn't like it. You know, I mean, at first I covered for him because I'm like, fuck, man, we're gonna be out of here soon. But then once I realized how fucking crazy and into it he was, it was, you know, I had to put my foot down and tell him I'm not lying for you anymore. And he didn't like that. And we ended up getting into a fight, and I ended up kicking his ass in about 10 fucking seconds straight, flat, because, well, at that time I'd been in many fights that were growing up and stuff, and I wasn't that little kid that he could push around when I pissed him off when I did go out there, because we did get into a couple fights, and he was a lot stronger than me and all that jazz. But it wasn't to the point where it was as regular as I got into a fight with my stepdad. But I mean, still love my stepdad. You know, he taught me right from wrong, and despite his faults, he was a really good person. You know, he tried to be a better person, and unfortunately it took cancer for him to realize the error of his ways. And you know, the sad thing was, he was the most healthiest person in our whole family. Like, he would do headstand push-ups against the wall and shit like that, and like just amaze us with the fucking, you know. So that's why I've been kind of getting on my ass to get to the pool 5 times a week now. I've been losing a little bit of weight, but what happened was, because of the back, and I lost place, my ex-girlfriend and shit, and then, you know, I had 2013, that summer, I spent 3 months going to the Woodstock Hospital every day, and that was hard, man. I wouldn't wish cancer on my worst enemy. It was, you know, because the thing about the Canadian Cancer Society is, and kind of socialized medicine here in Canada, is by the time they actually diagnosed him, he had esophageal cancer. I guess it was a tumor on his esophagus. And because of the waiting lists in here in Canada and stuff, and kind of the way that we have our socialized healthcare, it took him about 3 months before they actually started to go in to give him treatment, and by then it spread through his whole fucking body. You know, he had no chance. And yeah, I spent that whole summer watching him die, waste away, getting eaten by fucking cancer. So that was hard. And it didn't help that his side of the family were being fucking assholes. Like, his brother was being a total asshole. I mean, I had a lot of respect for him and stuff, and I kind of wish that his side of the family would have been able to come together over everything, but instead they took the last $2,000 that he had because, you know, he couldn't spend it. He was fucking dying in fucking hospital. They were gonna use that to send his buddy from BC out, the Mike Atkins guy, who I can't fucking stand, but he was, you know, still a good friend, and they said they were gonna pay for it, but then not only did they say they're not gonna pay for it, but they took his fucking money and they went on a fucking vacation just before, as he was fucking dying. You know, and made my fucking brother and sister out to be the fucking bad person. And man. And the funny thing is, his mom, you know, the Grandma Josie, you know, on my dad's side of the family, she was really horrible to my family up until my dad was dying, and, you know, she felt bad, and we kind of made up, and we had, like, it was weird, you know, she became, you know, part of our family again, and the one aunt who was nice to us all the time was completely two-faced and turned into a total cunt, and the other aunt who was kind of not so nice to us as much, but was still a nice lady, totally reversed, and just, you know, it's crazy how that does stuff to people, you know. So yeah, it didn't help at all. So there was like a fight over where he was going to be buried, and fight over his ashes and stuff like that. It just turned into a fucking gong show, really. And so he passed away August 8th. Wasn't too far from just recently. 5 years. 2013. And that put me into a fucking dark hole, man. Because, like, I don't know, not having my dad around and just kind of watching all that shit, you know. I put on a lot of weight. I was in a lot of pain with my back, so I shot up to about 440 fucking pounds. Got diabetic, fucking cellulitis, almost died from that shit. That was fun. And became kind of like type 2 diabetic, so that was not good either. I totally brought it on myself. I was really depressed. Wasn't going out. Wasn't really doing anything. Maybe going out once every year for karaoke. Just kind of playing a lot of RuneScape and not really doing as much exercise. So, you know, it was a few years of just... It took me about 3 years to recover, to be honest with you. And, yeah, I never really had another relationship or anything like that with a girl or anything like that. It's been fucking 7 years dry now, so that wasn't fun. And I was at the point where, to be honest with you, I was ready to just ready to fucking die, you know. But I don't know, something just kind of... My sister, she had a kid, you know, so I have my niece in my life now, and, you know, I mean, even though it's not my kid, and I know my brother's probably not gonna have, cause he's gay, but he's a good kid, you know. I mean, you know, he's got a lot to learn, but, you know, he's a good person inside, and I fully support everything he does, and I hope that he, you know, makes it good in life and whatnot. And he was doing his music career and stuff, and kind of didn't really put all that effort that he probably should have into it, but, you know, I mean, he's figuring his own kind of path, and I respect that, and I hope he does well. But, yeah, you know, it's got 2 nieces now, so, you know, so that's something to look forward to, you know, like the family carrying on or whatnot, even though at this point I'm probably not going to be having any kids. Thing about my back is that it's the reason why I wasn't really doing a lot of exercise is because it was hurting. Like, I was... Pretty much, I've got about 3 or 4 hours per day. Like, I'm lying down right now on my stomach. This is the only time where I'm not in pain. Or if I'm lying on my back. If I'm standing up, I'm in pain. If I'm standing up for or sitting down, even sitting down in the most comfortable chair, after about 2-3 hours, I'm done. And I have to lay down again. And so that kind of makes it impossible for me to do a lot of stuff. Like, kind of wanted to do more of this media channel and stuff, and so this is kind of the reason why I haven't really been doing a whole lot the last few years, you know. Just been kind of following stuff. I've always been political. I've always had opinions like that. But the only people I really keep in contact from the Burlington years is my buddy Mike and his girlfriend. Well, his wife. They got married, you know. I was out west. I couldn't even be best man for that, you know. Kind of felt bad about that, but, you know, what could I do? I needed to be out there at that time. And, you know, I think a lot of it had to do, I started reading, you know, listening to Jordan B. Peterson. Kind of, you know, I used to, about 3-4 years ago, when I was really depressed, I figured I need to get out and do something, so I got into, like, political stuff. I was helping the NDP out. I was kind of liking the socialism at that time, but that was before they started promising everyone a free pony, and at that time they were just talking about, you know, making affordable daycare for people to get into the workforce, which is pretty much what most parties are still talking about now, at one degree or another. So I didn't really think that was too much of a thing. But I guess also with the 2016 election, it really kind of pushed politics. Even up here in Canada, the leftists went complete communists, and, you know, it's a global push around the world that the left has gone from classical liberalism to socialism and communism and all that other kind of wonderful Orwellian censorship that comes with it, as we've currently been seeing with a lot of stuff. So, yeah. But, I mean, like, let's keep it on, like, the personal level. You know, it's been a long, freaking hard road, man, you know, and I mean, I see, like, Paul Joseph Watson's talking about, like, people whining about, like, depression and shit like that, and I'm sure there's, you know, millions and millions of videos like that, but, and there's always people out there that have it harder than you, man, you know, like, but I've been lucky, you know, I've got a good group of friends, even if it's an online game kind of thing, you know, like, they've always been there to help me out, always been there to talk to me when I need someone. And I've always been kind of that person that, even though I can be very extroverted, like, I always get really annoyed when they do that stupid personality thing, because, like, I find it really kind of depends on your situation, really. You know, like, for me, because I grew up having to try out different kind of personas and stuff like that, like, I don't do it anymore. It was something you do when you're trying to figure out who you are as a kid, you know? Just kind of like, you know, you're not going to be in a place for too long, so what's the point of even bothering to make a long-lasting connection? Might as well just play the mysterious person, or play the clown, or, you know, play the, you know, serious guy, or, you know, all the stuff that you can pretty much just kind of work, you know, or be a complete liar. Like, there was one time, like, I was in Guelph that I was just like, oh yeah, I can ollie, like, this fucking high, man, what are you talking about? And, like, it just was complete confidence, you know, just complete bullshitting, you know, just like, and everyone knew I was bullshitting, but it was like, it was fucking hilarious, because, you know, they knew, they're like, how can you lie so well? I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm telling the truth. And, like, they'd be like, fucking, like, I was trying to keep my face was straight, was hilarious. But, you know, it was just kind of one of those things where, you know, you kind of learn a lot about people's personality and stuff. Like, I could be an extrovert if I'm around good people and I'm having a great conversation, intellectual and engaging, you know, people that give a damn about their surroundings and the future and stuff like that, because I've always been that kind of minded person where I always kind of, like, been politically active or philosophically kind of inclined. I like having conversations about political ideologies or theology or pretty much anything, really. You know, I keep an open mind to stuff. You know, I'm not like a Christian or anything like that. You know, I mean, I'm kind of agnostic. You know, I mean, there's no really evidence to believe whether or not there is or isn't, or if it's even as it says in, like, scriptures and stuff like that. You know, I mean, and I'm not going to be, like, taking any drugs and going into the new age shit like Kundalini fucking yoga or any crap like that, you know. It's just not really my thing. You know, you really got to just find what works for you. That's the best advice you can really give to anyone, you know. I think a lot of it kind of, I realized that, you know, I mean, I had to really kind of get into shape, and after 440 pounds I'm down to about 360 now, and I've been kind of around that at least that's where I last managed to weight pretty much. Like, I haven't really gotten a scale. I probably need to do that, but it's kind of funny because not a lot of scales go past 300, so you have to almost get those like elephant scales for fat guys. Jeez. But no, it's I've actually been losing a lot of weight. I've been going 5 times a week, been going since the spring, so that's definitely helped me out. I've got like a huge belly, but and like this is like I've always had a big frame, like a big build for a guy. It's mostly my stomach and stuff that I've had to really been trimming the fat on, which is good because I've been working my ass off for that. So yeah, that's pretty much it really. I mean, kind of wanted to do more getting out there and doing more media stuff, but it's kind of hard to do. It's it's not easy, and it's at the point too. It's like, what's the point with YouTube, right? You're gonna get freaking pulled off anyway. So I don't know. It's just kind of weird because, like, I don't know, probably admitting to like no one, or maybe to my enemies. They're probably gonna use this down the road, but I don't know. I still have like real hard times coping with stuff. It's like I don't know. Like, I managed to like be fine when I'm awake and stuff, like, but I don't remember my dreams really much anymore. But like when I do, it's usually like this weird fucking thing where it's like I'm remembering when I was happy, or when I was with like my original like fucking girlfriend from high school, which is like fucking almost like 11 years since we've like fucking broken up pretty much, and I still fucking think about her when I'm dreaming and shit like that. I guess it's because I was like happy for a bit. I don't know. It just really kind of seems like my like fucking subconscious is just kind of like torturing me. It's like, this is what you used to enjoy and used to be happy and shit like that, and now I'm fucking crippled and I have like all kinds of fucking problems. I don't even, it's kind of embarrassing. Half of fucking shit that I have, like I can't even feel half my fucking legs. That's great. My like down, well, I can feel like down from my knee to my like foot on my right and left leg, but the thighs can't fucking feel anything. Like, sometimes I can when it's a little bit better, but if I've been working, or not working, but like swimming or whatnot, or if I've been doing a lot of stuff like that, I get to the point where I've got maybe about 50% feeling in my left and right leg, 50% feeling in my lower back. If I like touch it, it fucking feels like someone else is touching it. It's really weird. Like circulation problems, stuff like that. So yeah. And like, I tried doing this thing where I did an experiment with Plenty of Fish, like dating sites, because, well, I kind of fucking hate those things, or the concept of them, even though I can't really say anything bad about them technically, because it used to be a faux pas, or like something people would like say, oh, don't date a fucking psychopath or anything on the online thing, but, or that it was all desperate people, lowered expectations, like on Mad TV, that show. But it's I did this thing as an experiment on Plenty of Fish where I was completely brutally honest. I was like, I'm a nice guy, smart, intelligent, very loving, but then I told him like exactly what was wrong with me, all my physical stuff and like my situation, and it did not work out too well. I got like 2 responses. One was probably a prostitute. The other one was like some chick who had like a fucking like thing with her throat or some problem or whatnot, but I didn't care. I talked to her and stuff, and so like went to London to meet her and whatnot, and things didn't really work out, mostly because like I was kind of having problems. So yeah, so that was fucking awkward, and that kind of deterred me from really talking to females for the past few years. So yeah, kind of felt like I'm doomed to never really be with anyone, which, just alone, admitting that thought, there's, plenty of dudes that would probably fucking off themselves right now. And, I don't blame them. I don't know, I'm just kind of... It's really fucked me over, and it's really fucked with my head. I've been very depressed with a lot of stuff, but I mean, I'm still, like, awake enough to know that there's a lot of bullshit going on, like, politically aware of stuff, but, and I'm really well versed in my arguments and stuff when I'm talking about that stuff, but, you know, it's like, sometimes you can't help but feel like, what's the fucking point, you know? It's, you know, you're probably never going to really be happy, so it's really what I'm doing right now is the only thing that I'm finding any kind of fucking will to carry on without fucking going out in front of a goddamn train and letting it just fucking do it, because I wouldn't feel a fucking thing, is, well, I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't know, the more I've been finding that if I do good things for people, that's kind of rewarding, you know, try to help my sister out whenever I can, babysitting, you know, help my friends online or whatnot, in like a stupid online game if they need help with stuff, because it makes me feel good about myself, you know, feel like I'm not fucking completely useless, that I actually have some purpose on this god forbidden fucking hellhole. And also, like, when you see like those shows where they have like those EVPs and stuff, where they're like getting like those weird like digital recordings and shit that I find interesting, and like haunted places, and it's like voices from people who are like trapped in like time or some shit, that just scares the fuck out of me. It's like, what if I'm like, you know what, fuck life, I'm in so much goddamn pain, I'm sick of, like, you know, not making a dent in the fucking world, I want to end it all, and then like you fucking take yourself out, and then you just end up getting stuck in the same fucking place, but you're dead and you can't do shit, and you just watch everything fucking go to crap around you, all the people you love and fucking stuff like that, and like seeing their pain, that fucking deters me, because that's a possibility. So it's like, fuck, I might as well just live out my fucking days till I'm old or whatever happens, you know, like, shit. You know, it's not like you can really control it, you know. I mean, I keep that open mind, you know, when you look at like how much of the universe is like dark matter, dark energy, shit like that, you know, maybe there is some sort of fucking spiritual realm or some shit like that, but I don't think we ever understand what it really is until we get there, which is why I don't believe in spending my whole life to follow some book, people saying what you can do and what you can't do, because as much as I'd like to see people get justice in the afterlife, there's sure as hell no justice in this life, you know? I mean, there is sometimes, but you gotta fight like hell to get it, and, you know, it ain't easy. And, you know, it's easy to criticize a lot of people, call them crazy and stuff, but if people make their points, and you see just the craziness of what's going on in the world, you know, you gotta make a stand and just be like, hey, it may sound crazy, but it's true, you know, or it's something that you know deep in your gut, you know, you gotta do, or you gotta carry on. It's really it's something you can't explain, you know. I mean, it's easy to quit, and I can see why a lot of people do, and maybe they do find peace, I don't know, but it just feels like I might as well try to get back in shape, which is what I've been like kicking my ass to do. I've lost about 30 pounds since I started, like this spring. I was kind of losing weight before by kind of not eating as much crap and stuff like that, but I've got a long ways to go still, so, but you know, at least I've got hope now, you know, or at least not hope, just more of a will to try to kind of preserve myself for as long as I can, to, you know, help my family out if I can, because I mean, even though my, like, probably both my dads are passed on now, my mom has like married her new husband, and he's alright, but I kind of got mixed feelings sometimes about him, and not exactly the best role model either, but you know, I mean, I'm kind of like the moral center because, like, my family has a tendency to be really crazy, and I kind of seem to have that kind of tendency to kind of calm them down a bit and kind of approach things from a logical viewpoint, as opposed to, you know, blowing things out of proportion and getting really emotional, and then everyone's fucking slamming doors in each other's faces and shit like that, right? So, you know, I definitely know that if I did, you know, anything happened to me, my mom would fucking be inconsolable pretty much, because, well, I don't, like, try to play favorites and stuff. Every mom loves their kid, you know, regardless and stuff like that, but, you know, I do try to help out as much as I can, more than my other siblings. I don't know if that's just a 90s kid thing compared to a millennial thing, but, you know, I mean, they're still good people, and I still love my brother and sister and all that jazz, you know. And I want to help my sister raise, you know, her daughters and my nieces and stuff like that, even though she's in Ingersoll, and, you know, I don't mind babysitting and stuff like that and helping out any way I can. And, you know, I'm going to love them as if they were my own kids, you know. That's just, they're going to be like the future of the family, pretty much, the genes of that, even though I've only got about like half of the genetic makeup as they do, probably less than that. Well, yeah, a lot less, probably like a quarter if that, but that shit don't matter to me. I'm not fucking all about the purity of the race or any of that crap, and I don't really give a shit about the whole genetic fucking thing. It's just more of a, you know, just kind of like a hope for the future thing, more than it is, my genes will live on. You know, like, I don't believe in that shit whatsoever, but, you know, it's just kind of more of trying to, you know, you gotta find reasons to really kind of keep going. You know, I just taking it one day at a time, and that freaking fly that keeps trying to take my spotlight. But I mean, what, this is like probably a 3-hour thing right now, so if I put it up, I mean, it's almost like a feature-length documentary of like, or like Lord of the Rings Roy story. You shall not pass. I look more like Gimli anyways. Toss me. But yeah, so for anyone that actually took the time to listen to this, I don't have any medals to send you, but you probably deserve some. And guess I'll just leave it at that. It's really kind of like my life story and my weaknesses and strengths, I guess, if you could say that, or life experience. So I'm going to leave it at that, and thanks. I really appreciate it if anyone's actually taken the time to watch all this, because I've kind of gotten to the point where everyone's like, oh, everyone has the short attention span, and, you know, God forbid you put anything longer than 11 minutes, and I'm like, well, I'll just put something for an hour long or 3 hours long, you know, just see who actually has the balls to listen it out, or the free time, or, hey, you know what, people give stalkers a bad name, but hey, they are just really devoted listeners. That's oh, that's a bad joke. But anyways, keep on rocking in the supposed free world, and thanks for listening to well, everything. Peace.